Chapter 136. The Enforcer Peak, the Elite Disciples Area. It was because of that experience in the secret territory that Yu Haoran found out why Hishuda had betrayed the 100 Chi Gate. It was also because of that experience in the secret territory that he found out some secrets that were not considered secrets at the time. However, before the 100 Chi Gate was destroyed, they were definitely the most hidden secrets. Unfortunately, when he had just broken through to the martial ancestor realm, his cultivation in the poison way was not very deep. Facing Hishuda, who was already at the peak of the 9th grade martial king realm, he could only hide as much as possible to avoid being discovered. In this life, after returning to the 100 Chi Gate and returning to the sect, the enemies who had besieged Qingyun Peak were the targets that he wanted to eliminate in advance. In other words, even if he did not hate the sneak attack on his eldest senior, he would not let Hishuda go. The only difference was that the length of time he would take revenge would depend on his own cultivation. When he arrived at the residence of the first peak 9th grade martial ancestor realm elite disciple, Fowling used his divine sense to describe the appearance of this disciple. No! Shaking his head, Yu Haoran immediately rushed to the residence of the next peak 9th grade martial ancestor realm elite disciple. No! He continued to move to the residence of another peak 9th grade martial ancestor realm elite disciple. No! This one is not either. After checking the residences of 4 peak 9th grade martial ancestor realm elite disciples, Yu Haoran could not help but feel anxious when he realized that the person in the residence was not Hishuda. According to the time, even if the disciple that he had knocked out was not discovered, it was about time for him to wake up. If that disciple notified the Enforcer Peak and sounded the alarm, then his plan of using a sneak attack to capture Hishuda alive would fail. It's him. After hearing Fowling describe the appearance of the disciple in the 5th residence, Yu Haoran was pleasantly surprised and could not help but let out a sigh of relief. Then he took out a cloth bag from his chest and poured out a small pile of white powder from the bag. He then blew at the residence of Hishuda. 5 seconds later, Yu Haoran, who had retracted his aura, sneaked into the courtyard. That pile of white powder from earlier was called masking powder. It was concocted using the poisonous tail of a peak 7th grade, 9th level exotic beast, a rattlesnake, combined with 7 types of extremely poisonous spiritual herbs. The masking powder was not used to harm people. It was used to numb the spirits of martial arts grandmasters and lower their alertness. Sneaking into the courtyard, Yu Haoran followed Fowling's instructions and arrived outside Hishuda's training room. Looking at the closed door of the cultivation room, Yu Haoran was not anxious. He calmly took out a pill bottle from his bosom. Then, he poured out a pill that was pitch black in color. However, it was emitting a faint fragrance. Holding the pill tightly in his hand, Yu Haoran directly released his aura. Then, he pretended to be anxious and shouted in a hurried tone, "Senior He, I am Duan Zhoming. There is news from above." Duan Zhoming was a peak 2nd grade martial arts grandmaster. He was not only a disciple of the Disciplinary Peak's Disciplinary Hall, but also a trusted subordinate of Hishuda. More importantly, he and Hishuda were moles placed in the 100 Chi Gate by the same faction. Therefore, by using Duan Zhoming's identity and tone, it was enough to make Hishuda lower his guard and leave the cultivation room. "Zhoming, what are the orders from above?" As expected, Hishuda casually asked as he finished his training and left the cultivation room. "Senior He, the orders from above are..." Seeing Hishuda open the cultivation room's door, Yu Haoran, who had been worrying about what excuse to fabricate, was delighted. He hurriedly used his elemental energy to wrap the pill and threw it directly at Hishuda. The pill wrapped in elemental energy was not only as fast as lightning, but because of its speed, it created a faint sound of breaking through the air. It was precisely because of this faint sound of breaking through the air that Hishuda became vigilant. His originally casual expression suddenly became tense. He turned his head to look at Yu Haoran as he dodged the pill that was shot at him. Although Yu Haoran's sneak attack was very stealthy and sudden, his cultivation was only at the peak of a 9th grade martial warrior. His strength was barely at the peak of a second-grade martial master. As for Shuda, the target of the sneak attack, his cultivation was at the peak of a ninth-grade martial arts grandmaster. Therefore, not only did the pill not hit Shuda, but it was also shattered into powder by Shuda's palm. "Who are you?" After shattering the pill and seeing that the person standing at the door was not Duan Zhoming, Shuda questioned him sternly. At the same time, a murderous intent emerged in his heart. His and Duan Zhoming's identities were not known by anyone in the 100 Gate. Even the factions behind them knew very little. This was to ensure absolute secrecy. However, how did this 16 or 17-year-old youth in front of him know his and Duan Zhoming's identities? Did he have evidence in his hands to prove that he was a traitor? Did he reveal this secret to anyone else? Would killing him be able to keep this secret? Seeing Shuda shatter the black pill, Yu Haoran was not disappointed. Instead, a trace of joy appeared on his face. This was because the pill, just now, was called the Energy Sealing Pill. As the name implied, it was a special pill that could seal one's origin energy. It was a pill that he had accidentally created when he was the vicious Sword Emperor in his previous life. It was refined from one of the world's famous 5 poisons, the Black Scorpion, which had reached the peak of the 9th grade of the 9th level. Then, it was supplemented with 6 9th-grade spiritual herbs that could directly increase one's cultivation and 11 10th-grade spiritual herbs. The Black Scorpion and the 17 spiritual herbs all came from the mountain that he had once refined. This was also one of the main reasons why he was sincerely grateful to Feng Qingyun at that time. But, limited by his own strength and the grade of the materials, the origin sealing pill he refined was barely able to attain the 1st grade of the 9th grade, and it was only capable of sealing Shuda's origin energy, but was unable to seal his soul. Moreover, it could only seal origin energy for 5 seconds. In other words, within these 5 seconds, he had to find a way to capture Shuda. Otherwise, he would have to use the Vajram monkey's blood essence. However, he intended to use the Vajram monkey's blood essence to deal with the 3 peak masters of the enforcement peak. He did not want to waste it on Shuda. Shuda, don't you know who I am? Seeing that Shuda did not know who he was, Yu Haoran asked with a smile that was not a smile. Fortunately, the energy sealing pill did not take effect immediately. It required Shuda to circulate his origin energy for it to seal origin energy for 5 seconds. Therefore, he was not only asking a rhetorical question, but also looking for the best opportunity to make a move. A mere 9th-grade martial warrior ant? Do I need to know you? Shuda looked at Yu Haoran with contempt and ridiculed him with disdain. Yes, I am a small ant, but I'm also a person who knows how to repay kindness. I'm not like some people who enjoy the generous treatment given by the sect while betraying the sect's information, willing to be a disdainful traitor. Chapter 137. Enforcer Peak, Elite Disciple Residential Area. In terms of eloquence, even 3 Shudas would not be Yu Haoran's opponent. In his previous life, he once scolded a martial saint expert until he fainted. He was also named as one of the top 10 eloquent talkers in the Tianxin continent. "Brat, who are you?" Hearing Yu Haoran mention the word traitor, Shuda's face instantly darkened. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to figure out the background of this young man in front of him, if it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to figure out how the other party knew of his identity as a traitor, he would have already slapped this person who dared to insult him to death. Don't tell me you forgot about me. In order to make Shuda reveal a flaw when using his elemental energy, he must keep him in a tense state. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to continue using the secrets he knew from his previous life to provoke Shuda. However, before he could finish his words, a deafening bell chime suddenly sounded from the law enforcement peak. Whether it was Shuda from the enforcement peak or Yu Haoran, both of them clearly understood the meaning of the bell chime. It was a warning that an enemy was invading. A single sound meant that the enemy's threat level was average, but it required all of the Enforcer Peak's disciples to gather. Originally, he wanted to use some of Shuda's secrets from his previous life to increase the advantage of his sneak attack. But now it was too late. Therefore, Yu Haoran could only take the risk and make his move. With the bone-piercing cold wind and the near perfection of the gale steps, Yuhauran closed in on Hishuda like a bolt of lightning. Seeing Yuhauran's sudden attack, how could Hishuda not understand that the bell that rang out from the Enforcer Peak was targeted at this young man in front of him? A mere 9th-grade martial warrior, and even if he used only 10% of his elemental energy, he could easily kill him with one slap. Therefore, when Yuhauran was less than a meter away from him, Hishuda began to mobilize the elemental energy in his dantian. But right at this moment, a black energy suddenly rose from his dantian and enveloped his dantian, causing him to be unable to mobilize the essence energy in his dantian for the time being. Although he wanted to use his spiritual energy to defend and counterattack, Yuhauran's attack speed was too fast. It was so fast that just as he mobilized his spiritual energy, a powerful palm strike landed heavily on his chest. Although warriors in the martial arts Grandmaster realm focused on cultivating their souls, as the host of the soul, the physical body and the soul were closely related. Therefore, the heavy blow to his chest had also affected his soul. Although his soul wasn't injured, the power that his soul had just mobilized was instantly scattered, making it impossible for him to use his soul to counterattack. Seeing that his sneak attack had succeeded, Yuhauran suppressed the joy in his heart and continued to use wind steps. Taking advantage of the fact that Hishuda was temporarily unable to circulate his divine soul and origin energy, he continued to attack the vital points on his body, preventing him from circulating his divine soul. At the same time, he used his origin energy to execute the acupuncture point sealing technique he had obtained from the ruins in his previous life. For warriors, whether it was origin energy or spiritual energy, before they could comprehend the power of the laws of heaven and earth, they had to go through the meridians in their body to unleash their power. Sealing the acupuncture points was equivalent to sealing the source of power. Due to Hishuda's high status in Enforcer Peak, the courtyard that he resided in not only had a beautiful environment, but also a large area. Such an intense battle earlier actually didn't attract anyone's attention. This was out of Yuhauran's expectations. However, this was just as well. Looking at Hishuda, who had been sealed by the acupuncture point sealing technique, Yuhauran didn't relax. Instead, he bent down and searched Hishuda's body. Other than a dozen 7th-level, 3rd-grade spirit stones and a few bottles of elixirs used to raise one's cultivation base and nourish one's spiritual energy, there were no other suspicious items. Thinking that Jia Tongxi had hidden his lifetime collection in the technique refining room, Yuhauran carried Hishuda into the technique refining room and discussed with Thaling in his mind. Thaling, help me check the technique refining room and see if there are any switches or secret rooms. Yuhauran, there's no need to trouble yourself. There are no switches in the technique refining room. When Yuhauran had begun searching Hishuda's body, Thaling had already used his divine sense to check the technique refining room. If he had discovered anything, he would have already warned Yuhauran. There was no need for Yuhauran to remind him. That's not right. Yuhauran frowned and muttered to himself. According to the information that he had gathered in his previous life, Hishuda had been in contact with the forces behind him for more than 10 years at the 100-Chi Gate. It was impossible for him to not leave behind any clues. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. Yuhauran's gaze once again stared at Hishuda. Yuhauran, look at that kid's left ear. Thaling suddenly reminded, just as Yuhauran was examining Hishuda. Earring. If Thaling had not reminded him, Yuhauran would not have noticed that Hishuda's left ear was actually wearing an earring. In fact, it was not Yuhauran's fault for not noticing it. This was because the earring on Hishuda's left ear was very small. It was so small that it was only the size of a grain of rice. Furthermore, it was dark in color. At first glance, one would think that it was a black mole. He reached out and took off Hishuda's earring. After holding the earring in his palm, Yuhauran felt a faint energy fluctuation. This made him realize that this earring was not an ordinary accessory. Thaling, what is this? Although he felt the energy fluctuation, he did not discover any secrets about this earring through his divine sense and elemental energy. Yuhauran, This earring is actually a spatial magic item used for storage. Thaling introduced happily. Storage treasures, spatial artifacts. Hearing that this ordinary earring in his hand was actually a spatial magic item that could be used for storage, Yuhauran immediately shouted in surprise. Spatial magic item. In his previous life, he had once obtained a spatial magic item from a cave left behind by a martial sage at the peak of his level. The space inside was as big as a small mountain. Hence, he had a deeper understanding of spatial magic items. Therefore, he requested Thaling in his knowledge. See, Thaling, help me remove the original owner's imprint in my earring. In order to open a spatial magic item that was a storage type, one had to recognize an owner. In other words, it had to recognize an owner through blood essence or soul. In order to reopen and control the spatial magic item, one had to remove the original owner's imprint. Then, a new owner had to be recognized. Although the owner of the earring, Hishuda, was right beside him, Thaling did not need to take him seriously. He was merely a martial arts grandmaster. Therefore, after receiving Yuhauran's request, Thaling's divine sense directly entered the earring, intending to erase Hishuda's imprint. However, just as his divine sense entered the earring, it was forcefully expelled from the earring by a powerful force. Thaling, what's wrong? Thaling's surprised cry just now made Yuhauran mistakenly think that something had happened, so he quickly asked, "Boy, you might be rich this time." Thaling said, excitedly after carefully experiencing the force that had expelled him just now. "Thaling, what do you mean?" Spatial magic items, regardless of the size of the storage space, were the best treasures. Moreover, he was able to obtain a spatial magic item when he was a martial warrior. In itself, he was already considered rich. Chapter 138. Enforcer Peak, Elite Disciple Residential Area. Seeing that Yuhauran still had not realized the true value of the earring, Thaling had no choice but to explain in detail. "Yuhauran, this earring doesn't actually belong to this kid. It's a spatial dharma artifact of the person behind him. Using a special secret technique, it allows this kid to temporarily use a small portion of its space. Just now, when my divine sense entered the space of the device, although it was forcibly expelled by the device's owner, I was still able to roughly see the real space of the device." At this point, Thaling could not help but keep things in suspense. "Yuhauran, take a guess. How big is the space of this earring? How strong is the device's owner?" In order to know the size of the space of the device, one must first understand the strength of the device's owner. A martial saint who has just begun to comprehend the power of law. About 100 square meters. Yuhauran guessed, after combining the information he had learned in his previous life. "It is twice as big as your estimate." The pagoda spirit stared at Yuhauran as it explained the true space of the magic tool. It wanted to see the shock on his face. Unfortunately, for Yuhauran, who had a space as big as a mountain in his previous life, a 200 square meter space of space was not much of a shock to him. Perhaps Yuhauran's overly calm reaction made Thaling feel bored, so he signaled Yuhauran to put the earring into the victor. With the help of the law of time in the victor, the owner of the earring's divine sense was forcibly forced out of the device's space. "Hishuda, are you feeling incomparably fearful now?" In order to find evidence of Hishuda being a spy, Thaling needed to eliminate the owner of the earring. Yuhauran, who was temporarily free, planned to interrogate Hishuda and ask him why he had attacked Chu Zhongyu. Therefore, while threatening Hishuda, he unsealed the acupoints on his throat so that he could speak. "Kid, Hishuda, admit defeat after falling into your hands. But even if you want me to die, let me die knowing why. Who are you? What grudge do I have with you?" Hishuda, who had a belly full of questions, hurriedly asked after the acupoint on his throat was unsealed. "My name is Yuhauran. Chinyan Peak, Yuhauran." After hearing Yuhauran's introduction, Hishuda couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he thought about it carefully and realized that not only did he not know Yuhauran, but he also did not have any contact with him. Therefore, he asked in confusion, "Yuhauran, I don't remember having any grudges with you. Why did you ambush and capture me? He shoulda. Could it be that you've forgotten the two people you ambushed in the dense forest between the Yun Peak and Yun Peak 27 days ago? Yu Haoran had already mentioned his name and origin, but he shoulda still hadn't figured out the reason for their enmity. This made Yu Haoran gradually realize that the situation was unusual, so he further reminded him. Of course I didn't forget. Hearing Yu Haoran mention what happened 27 days ago, he shoulda didn't want to hide anything. I was asked by Junior Brother Zhao to take revenge for him. Junior Brother Zhao, revenge. He shoulda's explanation made Yu Haoran even more confused. He shoulda, tell me clearly, what the hell is going on? It's like this. Yu Haoran's puzzled expression also made he shoulda realize that the revenge 27 days ago was probably a trap that no one knew who it was targeted at. Therefore, he didn't leave out a single detail. After hearing he shoulda's story, Yu Haoran couldn't help but punch the ground and gnash his teeth. Zhao Xinyu. Combined with he shoulda's description and his understanding of Zhao Xinyu in his previous life, Yu Haoran could probably speculate the ins and outs of the whole thing. It turned out that the root of all this was jealousy. The stunning performance of the sect test, the provocation of the new disciples in the ranking competition, the commotion caused by the passing of the secret territory, all of these made Zhao Xinyu full of jealousy and hatred towards him. But Zhao Xinyu was very clear that with his own strength, it was impossible for him to deal with him, so he planned to get rid of him with the help of others. Although he was just a new disciple and didn't have the time or opportunity to make friends with senior brothers with high cultivation, his identity as the sect leader's illegitimate son gave him a very special position in the sect leader's faction. Many senior brothers with high cultivation tried to curry favor with him. Due to the special position of the law enforcement peak in the 100 Chi Gate, all the disciples in the sect feared the law enforcement peak and wanted to get closer to them. Zhao Xinyu had secretly contacted an extremely ambitious Zhao Yunfeng in the law enforcement peak's punishment hall through a senior brother in the martial arts grandmaster realm. He had reached the peak of the 7th level of martial arts grandmaster. He made various promises that he didn't know if they could be fulfilled and finally receive an answer from Zhao Yunfeng. Zhao Yunfeng had a good relationship with Hishuda and was one of the confidants that Hishuda had secretly nurtured. He was also the foundation for the future destruction of the 100 Chi Gate and return to the power behind it. Therefore, when faced with the request of his confidant, Hishuda didn't have the slightest hesitation and directly gathered people to help him take revenge. Although the cause of the matter was different from what he had guessed at the beginning, in the end, the reason why his senior brother had suffered such heavy injuries was because of him. Therefore, the self-blame in Yu Haoran's heart didn't disappear at all. Zhao Xinyu. Thinking of Zhao Xinyu's identity and Zhao Ji's doting of Zhao Xinyu in his previous life, Yu Haoran knew that it was impossible for him to touch Zhao Xinyu with just Qingyun's faction. If he wanted to touch Zhao Xinyu, especially if he wanted to kill Zhao Xinyu openly, he had to ally with the law enforcement peak. With the character of Gao Wanping, the peak master of the law enforcement peak, if he didn't show some means to intimidate him, and if he didn't make the law enforcement peak owe him a huge favor, it would be difficult for him to take the initiative to cooperate with him and force the sect master, Zhao Ji, to put righteousness before family. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran sealed Hishuda's mute acupoint again, and then asked the Thaling in his sea of consciousness if it had expelled the imprint left by Hishuda's master in the instrument. Enough! Just as Yu Haoran finished his question, the Thaling, who had used the power of Victor's law of time, replied at the same time. In fact, if it was simply to destroy the divine thought left by the instrument's master in the ear, the Thaling could do it with just a wave of his hand. However, he wanted to use the divine thought of ear's master, which contained a trace of the power of law, to refine a puppet for Yu Haoran. Although the puppet's strength was only at the peak of the martial emperor realm, it could use 30% of the power of law. He cut his finger and let the blood drip into ear. After the blood had completely merged with ear, Yu Haoran began to use his mind to enter ear's space. Chapter 139. Inside Ding's Space. Nearly 800 7th-level spirit stones of different grades and 3,000 8th-level spirit stones of different grades were casually piled up in a corner of the space. In addition to a large number of spirit stones, there were dozens of elixir bottles, dozens of wooden boxes filled with elixirs, several magic tools that exuded traces of pressure, and more than 20 kinds of refining materials. Among the 20 kinds of refining materials, there were materials that were suitable for refining a formation that gathered the power of the stars, and there was also a magic tool that he had been planning to use the refining school to refine. Of course, no matter how tempting these treasures were, they were not as important as evidence that could prove that Hishuda was the traitor. Therefore, Yuhauran did not carefully investigate the types and effects of these treasures, but carefully looked for evidence that could prove that Hishuda was the traitor. In the end, he found more than 10 open letters and 5 jade slips on a bookshelf on the east side of the space. After taking out a letter and pulling out the letter, Yuhauran found that he could not read the contents of the letter and immediately knew that this letter was sealed. After carefully observing the seal on the letter, Yuhauran found that the seal was not complicated and he could undo it with his ability, but with his current strength, it would take at least 5 minutes to undo the seal. Almost 5 minutes had passed since the bell was rung. Some people from the law enforcement peak would soon find this place, and he did not have so much time to waste. Therefore, he directly took all the letters and jade slips out of the space, and then handed them to Thaling to break the seal. With Thaling's strength and means, he could break the seal with just a wave of his hand. After only reading 3 letters, Yuhauran knew that today's matter was half successful. As for the remaining half, he needed to show enough means to deter the peak master of the law enforcement peak. First, he put the letters and jade slips on the ground, and then took out some spirit stones, elixirs, and elixirs from the space, and then put all these things in Hishuda's arms. Then, Yuhauran directly picked up Hishuda, left the practice room, and went straight to the top of the law enforcement peak, which was the area where the 3 peak masters of the law enforcement peak lived. "Who are you? Why did you kidnap senior brother He?" Just as Yuhauran left the area where the elite disciples lived, he encountered a group of people wearing the uniform of the enforcement peak. Seeing Yuhauran, who was holding Hishuda, an elite disciple who was at the peak of grade 7 martial ancestor realm, questioned him sternly. "I'm Yuhauran, the 9th disciple of Clear Cloud Peak's Martial King Wu Wei. I'm currently helping Enforcer Peak clean up the sect traitors." If he wanted to cause enough of a stir, he needed more people to know about it. Therefore, Yuhauran did not hide his identity or his purpose. "Traitor? Who's the traitor?" The peak's 7th grade martial great master disciple asked, feigning ignorance. "Who is the traitor?" "Your 3 peak masters of the law enforcement peak will give you an answer." How could Yuhauran not see through the other party's mentality? However, he did not care. He only needed to attract more people. Due to Hishuda's superior position in Enforcer Peak, none of the surrounding disciples dared to make a move. This allowed Yuhauran to approach the peak where the 3 peak masters resided without any obstructions. However, when he was less than 300 meters away from the peak, he had no choice but to stop. This was because the young man standing in front of him had caused Hishuda, who was in his hands, to temporarily lose its intimidating power. Ouyang Haoyu. Looking at the handsome young man with a temperament as gentle as jade, Yuhauran softly muttered. Ouyang Haoyu had the talent and potential of a peak martial saint. He also had the comprehension and willpower of a mid-level martial saint. He was 28 years old this year, and his cultivation was at the peak of grade 9 martial ancestor realm. At the same time, he was the only disciple of Enforcer Peak Master Gao Wanping. Yuhauran was not too familiar with Ouyang Haoyu. This was because in his previous life, when compared to Ouyang Haoyu was like a dazzling star in the sky, and he was like an ordinary stone on the ground. The difference between the two of them was like the difference between heaven and earth. Therefore, they did not have any contact with each other. The reason why he knew about Ouyang Haoyu was not because of the 100 Chi Gate, but because after the 100 Chi Gate was destroyed, he often heard rumors about Ouyang Haoyu when he wandered the continent. One of the top 10 young martial kings with the most potential in Tianxin continent, a monster ranked 9th in the Hidden Dragon ranking, the dazzling son-in-law of the Emperor Qin Kingdom, one of the most promising hidden dragons to break through to martial honorable realm, etc. This was the reputation that Ouyang Haoyu had made in his previous life. He was also the target of envy and pursuit. Now, his talent and potential were the same as Ouyang Haoyu's. His comprehension and willpower far surpassed Ouyang Haoyu's. In addition, he had 100 years of cultivation experience from his previous life and the omnipotent and omniscient Thaling's help. In this life, Ouyang Haoyu was no longer a high and mighty existence. In this life, he wanted to use his stunning performance to ruthlessly trample Ouyang Haoyu under his feet to avenge the humiliation he received in his previous life. Get out of my way. Affected by the memories of his previous life, Yu Haoran's attitude towards Ouyang Haoyu was not very polite. His tone even revealed a trace of contempt. Yu Haoran's rude behavior immediately made Ouyang Haoyu unhappy. He said with a cold expression, "I'll give you two choices now. The first choice is to let go of junior brother, he, and get out of the law enforcement peak. If you do, I can spare your life. The second choice is that I will personally make a move. The result is that you will die without a doubt. Ouyang Haoyu, if you dare to make a move, then I dare to make a move and kill Hishuda." Directly grabbing Hishuda's neck, Yu Haoran threatened. At the same time, he began to mobilize the Vajra monkey's blood essence in his meridians to guard against Ouyang Haoyu's attack. Because unlike the other people in the law enforcement peak, even the law enforcement peak's most authoritative hall master of the law enforcement peak and the mysterious black and white impermanence, when faced with Yu Haoran's threat, they had to be wary of Hishuda's existence. After all, Hishuda was the most valued disciple of the deputy peak master Lin Feng. They needed to give Lin Feng face, but they also had to be wary of Lin Feng's powerful strength. But for Ouyang Haoyu, not to mention Hishuda, even if the person Yu Haoran was holding at this time was the gate master Sun Zhao Xinyu or the law enforcement peak's deputy peak master Lin Feng, he would still dare to make a move. Because of his talent, his potential, his comprehension, and his cultivation speed, not only was he highly valued by the law enforcement peak master Gao Wamping, but also the previous peak master of the law enforcement peak, the current second elder of the Council of Elders, had clearly expressed his attitude. That was, even if the law enforcement peak lost 2 deputy peak masters, they would still ensure Ouyang Haoyu's safety. From this point alone, one could see Ouyang Haoyu's status in the law enforcement peak and the 100 Chi Gate. Chapter 140. Enforcer Peak. Ouyang Haoyu. No wonder all the sex disciples are talking about you behind your back. They say Enforcer Peak has raised an ingrate who doesn't know how to repay kindness. Now it seems those disciples were wrong. You, Ouyang Haoyu, are not only an ingrate who doesn't know how to repay kindness, you're even worse than a beast, a parasite. No, comparing you to a beast is simply an insult to the word beast. That's because those uncivilized beasts still know how to repay kindness for raising them. But what about you? I'm afraid in your eyes, the 100 Chi Gate is just a stepping stone that will help you ascend to a higher realm. I think in the future, if the 100 Chi Gate encounters danger, you, Ouyang Haoyu, will be the first to betray the sect, betray Enforcer Peak, and throw yourself into the enemy's hands. When Yu Haoran had berated Ouyang Haoyu just now, not only did he not lower his voice, he even deliberately used his Yuan Qi to amplify it. This time, not only did the surrounding Enforcer Peak disciples hear his words, but even the disciples of the other peaks not far from Enforcer Peak. Because the disciples of the other peaks didn't have much contact with Ouyang Haoyu, they didn't have much of an impression. But as Enforcer Peak disciples, especially those elite and core disciples, they had the deepest impression. Ever since Ouyang Haoyu had been appointed as a legacy disciple by Gao Wanping, not only did he have the best courtyard to use, he also enjoyed the highest authority in Enforcer Peak. Even the entire Enforcer Peak's resources, as long as he took a fancy to it, even the Vice Peak Master would have to obediently give it to him. If Ouyang Haoyu was someone who knew how to repay kindness and treat others well, then that would be fine. But because of Yu Haoran's berating just now, he was an extremely selfish person who didn't care about others. So the Enforcer Peak disciples only treated Ouyang Haoyu with respect on the surface. In their hearts, they really hated him, and even somewhat hated him. You're courting death. Yu Haoran's berating just now seemed to have exposed Ouyang Haoyu's bottom line. That caused him to fly into a rage out of humiliation. After roaring, he directly brandished his sword and charged at Yu Haoran. Sure enough, you're really a despicable villain. Looking at Ouyang Haoyu, who didn't care about Ishuda's life and death, Yu Haoran shook his head and sighed in disappointment, while moving Ishuda behind him. Ishuda to make Ouyang Haoyu's help him. How could he let Ouyang Haoyu's hand harm a harm? Therefore, while moving Ishuda, Yu Haoran used his consciousness to stimulate the Vajra monkey's blood essence in his meridians. Everyone to stop. Ouyang Haoyu's is to the work. And Yu Haoyu was activating the enforcers' to stop. Whether it was Yu Haoran, Ouyang Haoyu, or the surrounding law enforcement peak's disciples, all of them knew very well who the majestic voice belonged to. To the T, S is to stop is to act to use to how you T to have a T. He to stop, T to stop ts Yu Haoran, be careful. The Thaling in his sea of consciousness warned. No one would have thought that Ouyang Haoyu would still choose to attack, even though the Enforcer Peak's Peak Master had personally stopped him. At this moment, it was too late to activate the Enforcers' Vajra monkeys to move the Yuan Shi in his Dantian. Therefore, Yu Haoran could only watch as Ouyang Haoyu's sword pierced his heart. It wasn't easy for him to retain the memories of his previous life. His journey to the peak of martial arts had yet to begin. His sister had yet to grow up, and he had yet to meet his friends. All the unwillingness in his heart slowly surfaced. Was it all over? However, just as Yu Haoran was about to stab the sword into his heart, a powerful energy burst out from his chest. Although this sudden burst of power wasn't offensive, it formed the strongest defense. It forced Ouyang Haoyu's sword to stop 3 inches away from his heart. This is the life-saving jade pendant that Master gave me. Feeling the powerful force rising from his body, Yu Haoran suddenly thought of the source of this power and quickly put his hand into his chest. Looking at the countless cracks on the jade pendant that had completely lost its energy, Yu Haoran couldn't help but feel pain in his heart. Then he raised his head and looked at Ouyang Haoyu, then looked at the peak. Since his rebirth, in addition to Yu Haoqing, who wanted to humiliate his sister, Ouyang Haoyu was the second person who made him unable to control the murderous intent in his heart. That's right. In order to unite with the Enforcer Peak's Peak Master and force the Sect Master to punish Zhao Xinyu, he had just listened to the Enforcer Peak's Peak Master's order and chose to stop stimulating the Vajra monkey's blood essence. But what about Ouyang Haoyu? As Ouyang Haoyu's master, Yu Haoran didn't believe that Gao Wanping didn't understand his disciple's character. Then, when he spoke to stop, did he not guard against Ouyang Haoyu's disobedient attack? In other words, when he said to stop, it wasn't for him and Ouyang Haoyu, but for Qingyun Peak's Feng Qingyun. His meaning was very clear. He had already done his best, but Ouyang Haoyu didn't listen to him, so he couldn't do anything. So Yu Haoran's death was in vain. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran's originally clear eyes gradually turned red. Forget it. So what if Zhao Xinyu was the sect master's son? If he couldn't get rid of him openly, then he would do it secretly. Even if he couldn't get rid of Zhao Xinyu now, what about in the future? With his own talent and potential, with the 100 years of cultivation experience in his previous life, with the peak martial emperor's state of mind, with the help of the omniscient and omnipotent Thaling, how long would it take for him to re-enter the martial emperor realm? Since that was the case, he might as well kill him to his heart's content today, turning the world upside down and directly killing until no one dare to provoke him in the future. Help me look after him. Yu Haoran directly threw Hishuda in his hand to Wu Yu, who had come to watch but was standing at the back of the crowd. Receiving Hishuda thrown by Yu Haoran, Wu Yu's pale face showed a trace of helplessness. He suddenly remembered what Yu Haoran said in the elite disciple area. He was considering whether to leave the law enforcement peak and choose to join Xinyan Peak. After throwing his Shuda to Wu Yu, Yu Haoran looked straight at Ouyang Haoyu, a sinister smile flashing on his face. Ouyang Haoyu, today, whether Gao Wamping personally makes a move or all the elders of the senior elder group make a move, you will undoubtedly die today. Humph! Faced with Yu Haoran's threat, Ouyang Haoyu couldn't help but coldly snort. With the cultivation of a mere 9th-grade martial warrior, not to mention the master and senior elder behind him, he could easily kill Yu Haoran with a single finger. He was now just waiting for Yu Haoran's defense to suddenly disappear. One punch, just one punch, and nearly 1/3 of the sparks in front of him were destroyed. Then, he threw out several punches in succession, destroying 90% of the sparks that were enveloping him. Turning his head to look at the solemn Lin Wei, Yu Haoran grinned sinisterly. He squatted down and then jumped up, his entire body directly leaping 1,000 meters into the air. Die for me! When his body began to fall, Yu Haoran clenched his left fist tightly. Then, he accelerated his gravity and formed a heavy punch with his own strength. He directly smashed towards Lin Wei and Ouyang Haoyu, who was not far from Lin Feng's feet. Don't be so arrogant. Looking at Yu Haoran, who was descending from the sky, Lin Wei lightly shouted and directly threw out a Martial King-level umbrella-shaped magical artifact. The umbrella-shaped magical artifact that was thrown out grew in the wind and instantly became a giant umbrella that covered the sky. It then covered him and Ouyang Haoyu, who was below his feet. Looking at the umbrella-shaped magical artifact that was emitting the majesty of a martial king, Yu Haoran did not care at all. He borrowed the powerful impact of his huge body falling rapidly and directly smashed towards the umbrella-shaped magical artifact. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening roar, the umbrella-shaped magical artifact was directly smashed into pieces by Yu Haoran. As the owner of the umbrella-shaped magical artifact, Lin Wei's mind was connected to the magical artifact. When the magical artifact was destroyed, his mind was also severely damaged. His mind that was instantly damaged caused him to be unable to use his spirit to control his body. His entire body was like a kite with a broken string directly falling from the sky. Yu Haoran, who landed on the ground one step ahead and directly smashed a 3-meter deep hole in the hard ground, looked up and glanced at him. Then, his right hand directly stopped the falling Lin Wei. At the same time, his left hand opened up and directly slapped towards Ouyang Haoyu like a giant fan. Animal, you're courting death. Just when Yu Haoran's giant palm was about to slap Ouyang Haoyu to death, an angry shout suddenly came from the courtyard in the middle of the peak. Chapter 142. Enforcer Peak. Yu Haoran's expression turned serious as he faced the gigantic palm that seemed to blot out the sky. At this moment, if he did not quickly withdraw the palm that was aimed at Ouyang Haoyu and dodge the attack, he would definitely be hit by the gigantic palm that seemed to blot out the sky. Yu Haoran knew that Gao Wanping, who had attacked out of anger, had directly used the strength of a martial emperor from the dense soul energy emitted by the gigantic palm. He was afraid that he would not be able to withstand the power of the palm if he used 70% of the Vajram monkey's blood essence. Therefore, Yu Haoran did not force it. He temporarily withdrew the palm that was aimed at Ouyang Haoyu and leaped backward to avoid the gigantic palm. At the same time, he threw Lin Wei, who he had just caught, to temporarily get him out of the battle. Seeing that Yu Haoran had dodged the attack range of the giant palm, the palm that was originally in the shape of a slap lightly clenched and directly grabbed the pale-faced Ouyang Haoyu, then brought him back to the courtyard on the mountain peak. Yu Haoran could not help but grin as he watched Gao Wanping bring Ouyang Haoyu back to the courtyard on the peak. After the battle with Lin Wei, His body had already adapted to 70% of the Vajra monkey's blood essence. Now, he could continue to use the blood essence's energy and increase his strength to the martial emperor realm. Therefore, he straightened his body and pounded his chest with his fists to increase the speed of the Vajra monkey's blood essence's eruption. Every time he pounded his chest with his thick arms, his 55-meter height would increase again. The first time, his height reached 56 meters. The second time, his height reached 57 meters. The third time, his height reached 58 meters. The fourth time, his height reached 59 meters. When his height reached 59 meters, Yu Haoran suddenly stopped pounding his chest and let out an angry roar. The enraged roar was not only like thunder, but also spread out in all directions. It wasn't just the 38 mountain peaks of the 100-foot sect that could hear the roar, but also the countless outsider beasts in the depths of the mountains. In the depths of the mountain range. Hey, didn't old Jean fail to advance to the 4th level martial saint? Why is he still alive? A giant white wolf with snow-white fur and a body the size of a small mountain asked a fox-like exotic beast that was less than half a meter tall and had 6 tails. That's not old Jean. It's the human martial saint expert who took away old Jin's corpse. He used the blood essence in old Jin's corpse to help his disciple perform a secret technique that allows him to transform into a strange beast. The fox strange beast explained with a complicated expression. It's that human martial saint's disciple. After hearing the fox beast's explanation, the white wolf's huge body couldn't help but tremble. Then, it withdrew its divine sense and obediently crawled there, not daring to continue using its divine sense to observe. Although the fox-like beast had also retracted its divine sense, a hint of greed flashed across its cunning fox face. 100 Chi Gate, 100 Chi Peak. Zhao Ji, who was sitting cross-legged in the training room, had an excited expression on his face when he saw the Vajra monkey, or rather, the transformed Yu Haoran. Zhao Ji didn't know why Yu Haoran had suddenly clashed with the Enforcer Peak, nor did he want to know. This was because he was now very interested in Yu Haoran's secret technique that allowed him to use the blood essence of strange beasts to transform. If he could master this secret technique and then find the blood essence of high-grade strange beasts, wouldn't the 100 Chi Peak have thousands of martial kings, or even thousands of martial emperors? With so many martial kings and martial emperors, wouldn't it be easy to get rid of the unstable elements in the sect? If this secret technique could break through the limit of the martial saint realm, then not only could the 100 Chi Peak become independent and become a new sect, but the newly established sect could also become a first-rate sect or even a top sect. Thinking of this, Zhao Ji got up and left the training room. Then, he appeared in the sky above the Enforcer Peak. However, he didn't take the risk to show himself. Instead, he planned to observe for a while longer. 100 Chi Gate, Senior Statesman's Peak. Looking at Yu Haoran, who was more than 60 meters tall and whose aura had reached the martial emperor realm, 7 of the 13 senior statesmen's elders looked at each other and saw a trace of greed in each other's eyes. Then, the 7 of them slowly disappeared on the spot. Seeing the 7 senior statesmen disappear, the other 6 senior statesmen at the peak of the 9th grade martial king realm looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. With their strength, they were no longer able to interfere with the matters of the Enforcer Peak. To be more precise, they were no longer able to compete for the secret technique that allowed them to transform with the help of strange beast's blood essence. Qingyan Peak, Fairness Residence. Looking at Yu Haoran, who had transformed into the Vajra monkey and broken through to the martial emperor realm, a trace of surprise, relief, regret, and self-blame flashed across Feng Qingyan's face. As a martial saint who comprehended the power of laws, Feng Qingyan seemed to have no desires, but in fact, he had been paying attention to the changes in the 100 Chi Gate. After all, the 100 Chi Gate was the place that nurtured and sheltered him. He had deep feelings for the 100 Chi Gate. He wanted to change the internal strife in the 100 Chi Gate, but he didn't have a good plan. Therefore, he could only place his hopes on those disciples with outstanding talent. He hoped that there would be a person with insight who could completely change the situation of the 100 Chi Gate. Gao Wamping's disciple, Ouyang Haoyu, was the focus of Feng Qingyun's observation. This was because Ouyang Haoyu's talent, cultivation speed, and dedication to the martial Tao made Feng Qingyun very satisfied. As for Ouyang Haoyu's fickle nature, in Feng Qingyun's opinion, as long as the sect treated him well, he would definitely repay the sect in the future. This was also why Feng Qingyun didn't choose to help when Ouyang Haoyu attacked Yuhaoran. Firstly, he knew that Yuhaoran had the life-saving jade pendant he gave him, so his life wouldn't be in danger. Secondly, he also hoped that Ouyang Haoyu could teach Yuhaoran a lesson and eliminate his misunderstanding of Yuhaoran and Qingyun Peak. After all, Ouyang Haoyu had a great chance of becoming the 100 Qi Gates sect master in the future. Feng Qingyun didn't want to see a gap in hatred between Qingyun Peak and the sect master. However, what he never expected was that Ouyang Haoyu, who was so valued and taken care of by the sect, was just like Yuhaoran said. He didn't care about the friendship between fellow disciples, ignored Yishuda's safety, and acted ruthlessly. What he didn't expect was that Yuhaoran, who was completely enraged, broke out with unimaginable means. Therefore, his heart was full of regret at this time. He regretted watching from the sidelines just now, regretted his mistake in judging people. Compared with Ouyang Haoyu's selfishness, his disciple Yuhaoran valued friendship and righteousness. He united his fellow disciples and respected his teachers. Moreover, in terms of talent, potential, comprehension, perseverance, and cultivation speed, Yuhaoran far surpassed Ouyang Haoyu. Since Feng Qingyun hoped that the 100 Qi Gate would have a person who could change the current situation of the sect, Yuhaoran was far more outstanding than Ouyang Haoyu. If you want to take advantage of my disciple, you'll have to ask if the zither in my hand agrees. Just as Feng Qingyun was sinking into self-blame, 10 martial emperors appeared above the law enforcement peak, temporarily freeing him from self-blame. He snorted disdainfully. Then, he disappeared from the fair residence. Chapter 143. Qingyun Peak. The person who attacked you was Yishuda from the law enforcement peak. In order to avenge you, your 9th junior brother broke into the law enforcement peak alone and is now fighting with the law enforcement peak. These were the words that rang in Chu Zhongyu's mind. 9th junior brother. When Chu Zhongyu heard that Yuhaoran had barged into the law enforcement peak alone just to avenge him, and even fought a bloody battle against the entire law enforcement peak, he could not help but yell furiously after waking up. People of the law enforcement peak, listen up. Whoever dares to lay a finger on my 9th junior brother will be Chu Zhongyu's mortal enemy for life. In the future, even if I, Chu Zhongyu, have to be smashed into pieces and have my divine soul destroyed, I will destroy his divine soul and kill his entire family. Chu Zhongyu roared angrily as he broke into the cultivation room of the quiet pavilion and rushed to the law enforcement peak. In order to avenge your eldest senior brother, your 9th junior brother broke into the law enforcement peak alone and is now fighting with the law enforcement peak. These words rang in the minds of Lu Guangwei, Dong Mingyu, Cheng Yun, Huang Zonghua, Pan Yuhai, Xiao Nan, and Lin Xian at the same time. 9th junior brother, although I am not as talented as you, I'm also a man with courage. Wait for me to come and help you. After hearing his master's voice, 2nd senior brother Lu Guangwei left the kitchen. He held a gray kitchen knife and rushed to the sky. 9th junior brother, don't worry. I will help you. 3rd senior brother Dong Mingyu also rushed to the sky. How dare they attack my eldest senior brother and attack my 9th junior brother? Damn it, let's fight with them. 4th senior brother Cheng Yun took out his weapon and also rushed to the sky. 9th junior brother, good job. Eldest senior brother did not invite you to the sect in vain. However, those bastards from the law enforcement peak dared to attack my eldest senior brother and attack my 9th junior brother. I think they are tired of living. Huang Zonghua, who had just consolidated his martial ancestor realm, cursed and rushed to the sky. Kill. 6th senior brother Pan Yuhai also rushed to the sky. Are they bullying us? Let's fight with them. 7th senior brother Xiao Nan, who had also drawn his weapon, could not fly because his cultivation had not broken through to martial ancestor. He could only use movement martial techniques to quickly leave Qingyun Peak. Is this brotherly love? Is this the foundation of Qingyun's future prosperity? 9 Junior brother, I admire you. Lin Xian raised his head and glanced at the law enforcement peak before taking out a talisman. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly used his origin energy to activate the talisman before disappearing from Qingyun Peak. Zhengjun, your 9th senior brother, is fighting with the law enforcement peak to avenge your eldest senior brother. This was the voice that appeared in Wu Zhengjun's mind. There was no angry oath like Chu Zhongyu, no cursing like Huang Zonghua, and no sighing like Lin Xian. Wu Zhengjun calmly stood up and left the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, then walked down the Clear Cloud Peak step by step. Although his expression was calm, with every step he took, the blood qi on his body became thicker. At the top of the law enforcement peak, when his height reached 60 meters and his aura reached the level of Martial Emperor, Yu Haoran carefully felt his body's ability to withstand the power of the blood essence. He discovered that his body had not reached its limit after reaching the peak of 9th grade martial warrior. At the same time, the diamond monkey's blood essence in his body had not been completely activated. When Yu Haoran recalled Gao Wanping's spiritual energy when he used the giant palm, Yu Haoran knew that Gao Wanping was not an expert in the initial stage of the Martial King realm. He was most likely an expert in the middle stage of the Martial King realm, which meant that he had surpassed the 3rd grade of the Martial King realm. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran used a secret technique to continue activating the energy contained in the blood essence, causing it to erupt with even more power. 61 meters, his aura had reached the peak of 1st grade Martial Emperor. 62 meters, his aura had reached the peak of 2nd grade Martial Emperor. 63 meters, his aura had reached the peak of 3rd grade Martial Emperor. He fiercely hammered the hard ground with his fists. His height had reached 64 meters, and his aura had reached the peak of 4th grade Martial Emperor. Yu Haoran, that's enough. Seeing that Yu Haoran's height had reached 64 meters and his aura had reached the peak of 4th grade Martial Emperor, Fowling could not help but reprimand him. He still intended to activate the diamond monkey's blood essence. With your current physical body at the peak of 9th grade martial warrior, you can at most withstand the power of a peak 3rd grade martial emperor. If you continue to increase your strength, the backlash from the blood essence will not only break your meridians, but you may even explode and die. Actually, even without Fowling's reminder, Yu Haoran already knew that he had reached his limit. Just now, he had only wanted to use the diamond monkey's blood essence to try and break through this limit. This was because in the half a month since the end of his training, he had not only used a formation to gather the power of the stars, to absorb the power of the stars, but he had also used a spiritual medicine to refine pills to strengthen his physical body. But even so, he still did not feel the bottleneck of 10th grade Martial Emperor. Stopping the secret technique to increase his blood essence, Yu Haoran raised his head to look at the courtyard on the peak. Then he squatted down and soared again. This time, he soared to a height of more than 3,000 meters. After reaching this height, Yu Haoran vaguely felt that there were many martial emperor experts hidden around. He did not need to think too much to know that these martial emperor experts were the true foundation of the 100 Qi Gate in the Tianxian continent. They were also the higher-ups who could decide the direction of the 100 Qi Gate. However, he did not pay attention to these martial emperor experts for the time being. Instead, when he reached the peak and began to descend, he mobilized the power of his blood essence. A portion of the blood essence's power gathered on his heavy fist, and a portion of the blood essence's power gathered in his mouth. Bang! As his body rapidly descended, when he was less than 1,000 meters away from the peak, Yu Haoran opened his mouth and spat at the courtyard on the peak. An incomparably powerful golden energy fiercely smashed into the courtyard on the peak. Looking at the golden energy smashing down like a star, a disdainful snort came from the courtyard on the peak. Then, the giant palm that had grabbed Ouyang Haoyu just now appeared on the peak again and quickly grabbed the golden energy that was rushing down. Looking at the giant palm that wanted to grab the golden energy, Yu Haoran was rushing down quickly. A trace of disdain flashed across the monkey's face as well. The golden energy that he had spat out just now seemed to have ordinary power. At most, it had the power of a peak first-grade martial emperor. In fact, it was not. This was because the golden energy was a secret technique unique to the Vajram monkey. It was a secret technique that consumed spiritual strength and origin energy. Its power was enough to reach the peak of a fifth-grade martial emperor. Therefore, the giant palm that was at most a third-grade martial emperor was directly smashed by the golden energy as soon as it came into contact with it. Then, the golden energy did not consume much of its power and continued to smash into the courtyard on the peak. Gal Wamping's face changed when he saw that the giant palm that he had condensed with spiritual strength and origin energy was easily destroyed by the golden energy. Chapter 144. Enforcer Peak. Because Gal Wamping had appeared too late, the amount of spirit in Yuan Li he could use was limited. The seal he had condensed in a hurry was barely at the level of a fourth-grade martial king. Therefore, the bowl-shaped seal wrapped in the golden energy did not last long before it was pierced by the golden energy. Then, it heavily smashed into the courtyard on the peak. However, the scene of the courtyard being destroyed by the golden energy did not appear as everyone had imagined. Because just as the golden energy was about to smash into the courtyard, a gray energy quickly condensed into a heavy fist and ruthlessly smashed into the golden energy, directly smashing it into pieces. Just as everyone heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that the courtyard formation had protected the courtyard on the peak, a huge beast closely followed the golden energy and smashed into the gray energy. Unlike the vertical attack of the golden energy, the huge beast's heavy fist suddenly changed direction and smashed into the gray energy's weak point, directly shattering the gray fist. Following the destruction of the gray energy fist, nearly half of the vegetation in the 3 courtyards on the peak withered in an instant. The buildings that had been there for many years were directly shattered. As for Ouyang Haoyu, who was standing in the middle of the courtyard, although he was not affected by the power, he almost fainted from fright. His face was completely pale. "You, Haoran, you're courting death." Seeing that more than half of the courtyard on the peak had been destroyed, Gal Wanping, who was too late to stop it, gnashed his teeth and growled. Gal Wanping didn't feel any heartache about the destruction of his monastery. What truly infuriated him was that the destruction of his monastery was like a vicious slap to his face. It was a fatal blow to his prestige and enforcer peak in the 100-foot sect. Gal Wanping, the moment you sided with Ouyang Haoyu, it was impossible for us to be friendly. Destroying your courtyard on the peak of Enforcer Peak is just the beginning. Next, I will destroy Ouyang Haoyu in front of you. I will destroy this root of disaster that will definitely bring disaster to the 100 Chi Gate in the future. You, Haoran, in my opinion, you are the root of disaster for the 100 Chi Gate. If I want to get rid of someone, I will get rid of you first. You, Haoran's strength made Gal Wanping unable to control the killing intent in his heart. After retorting, he formed a giant palm again, intending to crush you, Haoran, to death. You, Haoran, be careful. This guy's cultivation is not only at the peak of the 4th grade of the Martial King realm, but his true strength is probably not weaker than the peak of the 6th grade of the Martial King realm. He is a genius with outstanding talent and potential. Thowling could not help but remind him when he saw that Yu Haoran wanted to use his body to block the giant palm. Ignoring Thowling's reminder, Yu Haoran stomped on the ground with his left foot, and the cracks on the mountaintop, which already had more than a dozen cracks, became even wider. At the same time, Yu Haoran used the force of his stomp to leap back into the air. Borrowing the power of the Vajra monkey's blood essence, he used his light wind palm. Spring returns to earth. When a cultivator broke through to the martial master realm, they would be able to use Yuan Li to form martial skills. But Yu Haoran had just used the strength of a peak 4th grade martial king. Using the light wind palm, he formed a giant palm that was not any smaller than the one Gal Wanping had formed. Unlike Gal Wanping's giant palm, which was formed by the fusion of Yuan Li and Divine Soul. Yu Haoran's light wind palm contained a trace of vitality. Thus, when the two giant palms collided, the spring returns to Earth that was obviously weaker was not broken or pushed back by Gao Wanping's giant palm. Instead, the two giant palms intertwined. Along with the attack and defense, the giant palm that contained vitality gradually gained the upper hand. At the same time, unlike Gao Wanping's giant palm, which required his own divine soul to control, the giant palm formed by the Vajra monkey's blood essence and the light wind palm no longer required Yu Haoran's control. Thus, Yu Haoran, who was now free, raised his head to the sky and sucked in a deep breath. Soon after, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the law enforcement peak was sucked into his mouth like a flood. After absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, Yu Haoran's Vajra monkey form did not grow any taller. Instead, his body began to inflate like a balloon. Bang! When his body had expanded to its limit, Yu Haoran suddenly spat at Gao Wanping. A golden energy that was even more dazzling than before shot directly at Gao Wanping. Seeing the golden energy rapidly approaching him, Gao Wanping became flustered for the first time. This was because he could not understand why Yu Haoran did not need to control the giant palm in the air. Why was he still able to use the golden energy that was even more powerful than the giant palm? In fact, what he did not know was that Yu Haoran was able to do all of this because of the secret method of transforming the blood essence of strange beasts. This secret technique allowed him to transform into a mutated beast and possess all the strength of a mutated beast. Furthermore, he could multitask. He could use his blood essence to unleash the abilities of a mutated beast, and it wouldn't delay his own execution of martial skills. More importantly, the strange beast's martial skills and his martial skills could be exchanged and fused together. This was also why Thaling, who had an extraordinary background, exclaimed that the person who created this secret method was a monster when he saw it. Feeling the golden energy that was even more terrifying than the first time, Gao Wanping quickly adjusted his state of mind. The giant palm in the air that was originally attacking changed to a defensive position. After withdrawing a portion of his divine soul, he directly activated the artifact he had been nurturing in his dantian. Then, a bowl-shaped magical artifact that looked like it was used for eating appeared in front of him. A top-grade Emperor Stage artifact, the Heaven Cover Bowl. Just as Gao Wanping activated the bowl-shaped artifact that he had been nurturing, an old man among the 10 martial emperors in the air exclaimed in surprise. "I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect that one of the 3 top-grade Emperor Stage artifacts that appeared in the ruins back then would be obtained by martial nephew Gao." A middle-aged man, standing beside the old man, exclaimed with an equally shocked expression. Below, Yu Haoran could not help but sigh as he watched Gao Wanping directly use a top-grade Emperor Stage artifact. This was because he knew that it was impossible to break through the defense of a top-grade Emperor Stage artifact with his current strength, unless he took the risk and unleashed the full strength of the Vajra monkey's blood essence. He would barely be able to break through the defense of a top-grade Emperor Stage artifact with a martial skill he had mastered in his past life. In the Tianxian continent, there were 2 types of weapons. One was an ordinary weapon suitable for martial disciples, martial warriors, and martial masters. However, martial disciples focused on opening the meridians in their bodies, while martial warriors focused on tempering their bodies. Their fighting style was basically close combat, and they also used martial skills at the beginning of the yellow rank. Therefore, weapons were rarely used. Only when one's cultivation broke through to the martial master realm and the condensed and stored origin energy in one's dantian could leave one's body would a weapon be truly useful. When Feng Qingyun had arranged for Yu Haoran to train, he had said that when Yu Haoran broke through to the martial master realm, he would prepare a suitable weapon for him. The second was an artifact that was not an ordinary weapon and had a trace of power of the same level. Artifacts were divided into 7 realms and 4 grades. The 7 realms corresponded to the 7 realms of a cultivator: the Master Realm, the King Realm, the Emperor Realm, the Saint Realm, the Venerable Realm, the Emperor Realm, and the Legendary God Realm. Chapter 145. Enforcer Peak. There is a world of difference in power between each realm and grade of a magic weapon. Of course, it seemed like the 7 realms matched the 7 realms of a martial artist, but in reality, it was very difficult for a martial artist to obtain a magic weapon of the same realm. For example, Chu Zhongyu of Qinyan Peak. Chu Zhongyu's cultivation was at the peak of the 9th level of the martial grandmaster realm. The magic weapon he was using now was a low-grade zone realm magic weapon given to him by Feng Qinyan when he broke through to the martial grandmaster realm. After so many years, he had not found a magic weapon of a higher grade, nor did he have the ability to upgrade the level of his natal magic weapon. In a second-class, middle-grade sect like the 100 Feet sect, the average martial king realm experts mostly used middle-grade and upper-grade celestial weapons of the grandmaster realm. Only a few experts at the peak of the martial king realm used top-grade celestial weapons of the grandmaster realm. As for the experts in the martial royal realm, most of them only used magic weapons of the king's realm. Even Zhao Ji, who was the head of a sect and had already reached the martial royal realm, only used a king realm magic weapon. Therefore, no one expected Gao Wanping, who was only at the peak of the 4th level of the martial emperor realm, to use a top-grade emperor realm magic weapon. A trace of jealousy and hatred flashed in Zhao Ji's eyes as he looked at the top-grade emperor realm magic weapon, the sky-covering bowl. Yu Haoran, who had planned to pursue the victory, had no choice but to temporarily stop and think about how to break through his opponent's defense. Yu Haoran, don't be discouraged. Not only is this top-grade Emperor Realm magic weapon damaged, but it's also not compatible with that person. As long as you can attack the magic weapon's weakness, not only will you be able to break through its defense, but you'll also be able to take it. Fowling immediately knew why Yu Haoran had stopped attacking with a serious expression, so he reminded him. Fowling, that may be true, but I only have the strength of a Vajra monkey. I don't have a martial Emperor Realm spirit. How can I accurately find the weakness of a top-grade Emperor Realm magic weapon? Fowling's reminder did not make Yu Haoran relax in the slightest. He still had a serious expression on his face. With me here, what are you afraid of? Seeing that Yu Haoran had never thought of using his power, Fowling complained with some dissatisfaction. Fowling, I thought you could only use your divine sense and not your strength. Ever since he had met the Tower Spirit had attacked many times, but every time it attacked, it only used its divine will. It had never revealed its true strength. Therefore, Yu Haoran had never thought of using his power. That's right. I can't use Victor's power for the time being, but I've already recovered 30% of my spiritual sense. It's enough for me to help you lock onto the weak points of the magic tool, and I'll be able to accurately attack the weak points, Fowling said humbly. In fact, after absorbing Yu Haoran's life force for 3 months, Fowling was already able to use a trace of Victor's power. However, the cost of using Victor's power was too great, so he had never mentioned it. After a period of recuperation and the dual guidance of the Blood Ginseng and Earth Ginseng, he was now able to use a portion of Victor's power without affecting his injuries or paying too much of a price. However, if he wanted Yu Haoran to grow quickly, he could not let him know that he could use Victor's power. This was to prevent him from becoming complacent. If that's the case, help me lock onto the weak points of the magic tool. I'll start preparing my most powerful attack. Although he could not use Victor's power, being able to lock onto the weak points of a top-grade Emperor magic tool was enough to solve his current predicament. Therefore, while he was instructing Fowling to look for the weak points of the magic tool, Yu Haoran was once again absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from Enforcer Peak. This time, not only did he use the unique absorption method of the Vajra monkey's blood essence, but he also secretly used the secret technique of devouring to forcibly gather more spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Just as Yu Haoran was preparing his most powerful attack and waiting for Fowling to lock onto the weak points of the top-grade Emperor magic tool, an angry roar came from afar. It immediately attracted everyone's attention. When everyone turned their heads to look, they saw a black figure appear in the air above Enforcer Peak at lightning speed. After the black figure stood still, everyone realized that the person who was emitting a tyrannical aura was actually the most gentle person in Qingyun Peak, their eldest senior brother, Chu Zhongyu, whose temperament was the closest to Feng Qingyun's. Standing in the air above Enforcer Peak, Chu Zhongyu began to search for Yu Haoren's figure. However, after searching for a while, he did not see the person he was looking for. A trace of disappointment flashed across his face, and the tyrannical aura on his body grew stronger. Eldest senior brother, you're awake. Yu Haoren, who had been absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with all his might, forcibly stopped absorbing spiritual energy when he saw Chu Zhongyu suddenly appear in the air above the peak. He then called out happily, your ninth junior brother. The voice was very similar, and the eyes were very familiar, but the body and appearance were not Yu Haoren's at all. Therefore, Chu Zhongyu could not be sure if this giant strange beast that was more than 60 meters tall in front of him was Yu Haoren who had just spoken. Seeing the astonished look on Chu Zhongyu's face, Yu Haoren was afraid that he would misunderstand. So he quickly explained, Eldest senior brother, this is a transformation secret technique that I used. I can transform into a strange beast with the help of my blood essence, so you don't have to worry. Then, when he saw that the heaven-covering bowl was almost neutralizing the golden energy, he hurriedly reminded Chu Zhongyu, Eldest senior brother, you can't interfere in the battle now. Just watch for now. I'll talk to you in detail after I defeat Gao Wamping. Then, he resumed absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and asked Thaling to quickly lock onto the weak points of the top-grade Emperor magic tool. High up in the sky, above the Enforcer Peak, the victory has been decided. That kid is dead for sure. The middle-aged man who had addressed Gao Wamping as his martial nephew smiled and concluded when he saw that the top-grade Emperor magic tool, the heaven-covering bowl, had successfully neutralized the golden energy. That's right. With the protection of the top-grade Emperor magic tool, the heaven-covering bowl, the Peak Lord only needs to hold on until the energy of the strange beast's blood essence in that kid's body is exhausted. Whether he lives or dies depends on the Peak Lord. The white-haired old man standing next to him agreed. Above the 10 Emperor Realm cultivators, Feng Qingyun, who had an elegant temperament, not only took out the zither he had obtained from a stone room, but he also placed all 10 fingers on it. He was waiting for Yu Haoren to reach his limit so that he could use the zither to break through the defense of the top-grade Emperor magic tool, the heaven-covering bowl, and force Gao Wamping to stop. Eldest senior brother, where's ninth junior brother? Lu Guangwei, Dong Mingyu, Cheng Yun, Huang Zonghua, and Pan Yuhai, who had just arrived, stood next to Yu Haoren and asked anxiously while everyone was waiting for the energy of the strange beast's blood essence in his body to run out. That 60-meter-tall Vajra monkey was transformed from ninth junior brother using its blood essence. Chu Zhongyu explained as he pointed at the monkey that was absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with all its might. Chapter 146. Enforcer Peak. Huang Zonghua couldn't help but sigh when he saw Yu Haoren, who was more than 60 meters tall and abnormally strong. He didn't even dare to look directly at the thing he was riding. Sigh, looks like I, Huang Zonghua, am going to lose my title as the most handsome man, the most ferocious man, and the most idle in the 100 Chi Gate. Those senior and junior sisters who are infatuated with me are probably going to fall in love with someone else. Chu Zhongyu and the others used to dislike Huang Zonghua's narcissism and self-flattery. Now, not only did they not dislike it, but they also calmed down a lot. That's right, fifth junior brother. You should stay at Qingyun Peak obediently from now on, so that you don't get emotional. Cheng Yun, who was just as lively, couldn't help but tease. Found it. Just as Yu Haoren was about to reach his limit, Thaling, who had been carefully searching for the weakness of a top-grade Emperor Stage artifact with his divine sense, suddenly shouted in surprise. Then, he frowned and looked at the sky through Yu Haoren's sea of consciousness. A trace of hesitation flashed across his face. However, when he saw Yu Haoran absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with all his might, the hesitation on his face turned into determination. Forget it. If I'm discovered, so be it. Given how much that person values and dotes on Yu Haoran, he probably won't make things difficult for me after finding out that I have no ill intentions. When he thought of this, Thowling reminded him, Yu Haoran, if you want to succeed in one strike, you have to get close to the top-grade Emperor Stage artifact. So, while that person isn't actively attacking, hurry up and get close to the artifact. With one last breath, the energy accumulated in his body instantly reached its limit. Then, following Thowling's instructions, Yu Haoran stomped his feet and charged toward the top-grade Emperor Stage artifact, the heaven-covering bowl, like a cannonball. As he charged, he waved his left fist and looked like he was going to use a heavy punch to break the top-grade Emperor Stage artifact. Yu Haoran's actions were met with disdain and mockery from Gao Wanping and the 10 martial emperors in the air. Looks like using that kind of secret technique isn't without side effects. At least that brat's mind isn't very clear. The middle-aged man who addressed Gao Wanping as his martial nephew mocked. To be able to directly erupt with the strength of a peak 4th-grade martial king, with the cultivation of a peak 9th-grade martial warrior, how could there not be any side effects? Being delirious is probably the lightest side effect. The old man beside him not only mocked, but also viciously cursed. Let's take this opportunity to attack the green veins at the bottom of the bowl. When Yu Haoran was less than 10 meters away from the weapon, Thowling immediately pointed out the attack's location. Bang! The third shot of golden energy was far less powerful than the first and second shot of golden energy. This was because the Vajra monkey's blood essence was about to be used up. In order to ensure that he could defeat Gao Wanping and avenge part of his senior brother's death, he had to prolong the duration of his transformation. Therefore, he could only consciously weaken the power of the golden energy. A trace of pride flashed across Gao Wanping's face when he saw that Yu Haoran's third shot of energy was far less powerful than the first 2 shots. In his opinion, this was a sign that Yu Haoran was exhausted. However, before his smug smile could fully blossom, a crisp cracking sound was heard from the top-grade Emperor Stage artifact. Gao Wanping was stunned. Although the cracking sound from the weapon was very soft, so soft that the 10,000 Enforcer Peak disciples present did not hear it, the crisp cracking sound was like a thunderclap to the 10 martial emperors in the air. It shocked them as well. Yu Haoran knew that his attack had been effective when he heard the sound of a top-grade Emperor rank magic weapon cracking. Therefore, he used the Vajra monkey's physical strength to continuously bombard the damaged area of the weapon. Gao Wanping's expression suddenly changed when he saw Yu Haoran attacking the damaged area of the Heaven Shield Bowl. He shouted, Yu Haoran, stop right now. However, as soon as he shouted, a power that injured his soul caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood essence. Ever since Gao Wanping obtained the Heaven Shield Bowl, a top-grade Emperor Realm Magic artifact, he had discarded his original top-grade King Realm Magic artifact and used the bowl as his natal magic artifact. What was a natal weapon? It was a weapon that was nourished by one's soul and origin energy and was closely connected to one's mind. When a magic artifact was damaged, the owner of the magic artifact would also suffer the same injuries. Yu Haoran, now is the time. The pagoda's spirit reminded him as Gao Wanping spat out blood essence. Roar! Yu Haoran stretched out his huge monkey palms and grabbed the sides of the bowl from both sides. He raised his head and let out a howl. Then he exerted his strength and lifted the huge bowl-shaped magical item. Then Yu Haoran bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of his and the Vajra monkey's blood essence onto the top-grade Emperor weapon. Yu Haoran, what did you do to my natal weapon? Gao Wanping suppressed the mental injury caused by the weapon's damage with great difficulty. He immediately wanted to recall the weapon, but he suddenly realized that the intimate connection between his mind and the weapon had disappeared. When he raised his head, he happened to see Yu Haoran's actions. He immediately knew that Yu Haoran was the reason why his mind had lost contact with his natal magic tool. Thus, he questioned Yu Haoran angrily with a hint of panic. Yu Haoran ignored Gao Wanping's question. After spitting his and the strange beast's blood essence onto the top-grade Emperor weapon, he quickly made a hand seal and imprinted a mark on the weapon. When the first mark was imprinted on the weapon, which was about the same size as Gao Wanping, instantly shrunk a little. When the second mark was imprinted, the weapon shrunk a little more. When the sixth mark was imprinted, the weapon had shrunk to the size of a fist. Yu Haoran couldn't help but grin as he grabbed the top-grade Emperor Stage magic weapon. However, his grin startled Gao Wanping, the 10 martial emperors in the air, and the tens of thousands of law enforcement peak disciples who were watching the fight. Then, he swallowed the artifact, which had shrunk to the size of a fist, into his mouth. In fact, he was sending it into the tower, so that the tower spirit could help him remove Gao Wanping's spiritual imprint from the artifact. Yu Haoran returned the top-grade Emperor Weapon Heaven Covering Bowl to Marshal Nephew Gao. Just as Yu Haoran swallowed the weapon, a dignified voice suddenly rang out from the top of the enforcement peak. Yu Haoran raised his head to look at the middle-aged man descending from the sky and sneered disdainfully, "Who do you think you are? How dare you? This is the previous peak lord of our enforcement peak, the current second elder of the Boar of Elders, Elder Sun Lianping." Yu Haoran's rude and disrespectful behavior immediately angered the old man who appeared with Sun Lianping. He couldn't help but scold Yu Haoran in a loud voice. Yu Haoran glared coldly at the old man who interrupted him and threatened, "You're just a first-grade martial emperor trash. If you dare to talk so much, I'll kill you right now." Chapter 147. Enforcer Peak. That's right. You're right. There is a time limit to the transformation using the blood essence of the 5th rank Vajra monkey. Also, to tell you the truth, the secret transformation is about to end. Next, I'll turn back into Yu Haoran, whose cultivation is only at the peak of 9th grade martial warrior. Yu Haoran nodded. Contrary to everyone's expectations, he didn't refute it. Instead, he admitted it very honestly. Since that's the case, return the top-grade Emperor Stage magic weapon you just swallowed to the Peak Lord. Then, obediently surrender. Seeing that you're quite talented, perhaps I'll ask the Sect Master and Martial Nephew Gao to let you live. Yu Haoran's honest admission seemed to indirectly prove that Sun Lianping's vision was superior. He couldn't help but feel proud of himself. Ga. Due to the transformation into the Vajra monkey, although his speech wasn't affected much, some of his actions and sound were different from normal humans. For example, when he laughed, he could only make the Vajra monkey's unique squeak. Old man, don't be fooled by your middle-aged appearance. I'm sure you're not young. At least 100 years old. People say that the longer you live, the smarter you become. But why is this saying reversed in your case? The longer you live, the more muddle-headed you become. I even suspect that your IQ has been eaten by a dog. Brat, you're courting death. Yu Haoran's insults caused Sun Lianping's proud expression to instantly darken. He angrily reprimanded Yu Haoran. If it weren't for the fact that Yu Haoran's transformation hadn't ended, Sun Lianping would have already slapped this junior who dared to humiliate him into a meat patty. Old man, take a look at this. Ignoring the angry Sun Lianping, Yu Haoran mobilized the second drop of Vajra monkey's blood essence into his palm. He looked at Sun Lianping with a faint smile and asked, "The Vajra monkey's blood essence. Moreover, it's the blood essence of a 4th rank Saint Realm Vajra monkey." There was no need for the 11 martial royal realm experts to observe carefully. They could feel the powerful energy fluctuations from the drop of blood essence in Yu Haoran's palm. The only thing that puzzled them was that since it was the blood essence of a Class 4 exotic beast, why didn't it contain the power of laws? Fortunately, Yu Haoran's explanation dispelled the doubts in their hearts. Old man, I'm not afraid to tell you that the blood essence I consumed just now was the Vajra monkey's blood essence that stripped away the power of laws and half of its energy. Thus, after my transformation, my strength can only reach the peak of the 4th level of the Martial King realm. However, if I were to consume this drop of blood essence, although I would not be able to reach the level of a martial saint, I would still be able to unleash the strength of a peak 9th level martial king. At this point, Yu Haoran's cold gaze swept across the 11 martial emperors one by one. His voice was emotionless as he threatened them. With the strength of a peak 9th level martial king and the means of a peak Vajra monkey, if I were to go crazy, at least 7 or 8 of the 11 martial royal realm experts would be left behind. At this point, Yu Haoran suddenly pointed at Sun, Lianping, and Gao Wanping. His tone was full of killing intent, and his words were a blatant threat. And among these 7 or 8 corpses, there must be you, the old man who won't die, and you, the selfish peak leader. Faced with Yu Haoran's blatant threat, both Sun Lianping and Gao Wanping did not know how to refute. This was because they were really worried that Yu Haoran would consume the blood essence of a Class 4 Vajra monkey and use it as an excuse to start a massacre. In fact, what they did not know was that Yu Haoran's blatant threat was just an empty threat. He did not have the confidence to consume it. This was because when the energy of the blood essence was raised to the peak of the 4th level of the Martial King realm, small cracks had already appeared on his body. After the secret transformation ended, he would have to use a portion of pills and elixirs to heal his injuries. If he dared to consume a second drop of the Vajra monkey's blood essence that only removed the power of law and did not weaken the energy of the blood essence by much, Yu Haoran would explode and die from the energy of the blood essence without needing them to do anything. Yu Haoran, what do you want? Seeing the atmosphere fall into silence, as the leader of the 100 Qi Gate, Zhao Ji knew that he had to stand up and think of a way to resolve the conflict between Yu Haoran and the law enforcement peak. However, his original intention of roping in Yu Haoran began to waver. This was because he realized that although Yu Haoran's talent was outstanding, he was also a troublemaker. Moreover, he was the kind of troublemaker who would cause a shocking disaster whenever he stirred up trouble. If he succeeded in roping in Yu Haoran, he was worried that he would not be able to do anything in the future and would only be able to help him deal with the troubles he caused every day. Coldly looking at Yu Haoran thought carefully and felt that now was not the right time to fall out with Zhao Ji, so he could only temporarily not bring out Zhao Xinyu. In reply to the leader, I, Yu Haoran, am not a person who likes to stir up trouble. The reason why I attacked the law enforcement peak this time was all because of the law enforcement peak's Hishuda. At this point, Yu Haoran reached out his hand and sucked Hishuda, who had been supported by Wu Yu, into his hand. Leader, I'm sure you know the reason why I had a conflict with the Hall of Merit 26 days ago. It was because they wanted to embezzle the reward for clearing the secret realm. In the end, with your help and support, I received enough reward for clearing the secret realm. However, at that time, due to the sudden increase in my mental cultivation, I urgently needed to return to Qingyan Peak to make a breakthrough in my cultivation. Therefore, my eldest senior brother received the reward for clearing the secret realm on my behalf. At this point, Yu Haoran raised Hishuda and roared in grief and indignation. However, I never expected that as the most valued elite disciple of the law enforcement peak, Hishuda, who had no lack of cultivation resources, would not only lead 6 martial grandmasters of the law enforcement peak to launch a sneak attack, but also directly injure my eldest senior brother's soul. It was obvious that he wanted to silence him. Yu Haoran, do you have any evidence to prove that Hishuda was the culprit? Yu Haoran, who had transformed into the Vajra monkey, was already a peak 4th grade martial emperor. At this moment, the leader of the law enforcement peak, the vice sect leader, and the elders of the board of patriarchs were also martial emperors. Therefore, Lin Wei knew that it was not his place to intervene. Therefore, he quietly retreated into the crowd of law enforcement peak disciples and quietly observed the situation. However, when Yu Haoran pointed out that Hishuda was the culprit who had ambushed Chu Zhongyu, he could not help but angrily question him. Not only was Hishuda's talent and potential outstanding, but he was also a warm person who knew how to please others. Among the many disciples of the law enforcement peak, his prestige was even higher than Ouyang Haoyu's. Therefore, not only did he regard Hishuda as a successor, but he also treated Hishuda as his own son. Chapter 148. Enforcer Peak. Evidence. Seeing Lin Wei demand evidence, Yu Haoran sneered and pretended to reach his hand into Hishuda's chest. However, he seemed to have forgotten that he was now in the state of a Vajra monkey. Not only was he 64 meters tall, but his monkey claws were also many times larger than an adult human's. Therefore, his action of reaching for evidence not only did not produce any evidence, but also directly tore Hishuda's clothes. Subsequently, a portion of spirit stones, pill bottles, and spirit herbs, as well as a dozen letters and a few jade slips, fell from the torn clothes. Seeing the falling spirit stones, pill bottles, and spirit herbs, Huang Zhonghua's eyes turned. After a brief exchange with Yu Haoran, he hurriedly whispered a few words to Chu Zhongyu. Without any hesitation, Chu Zhongyu appeared beside the pill bottles and spirit herbs in a flash and reached out to catch them. Then, he pretended to examine them carefully and shouted loudly, "Everyone, although I'm not sure about the spirit stones, the pill bottles and spirit herbs are indeed the rewards given to Ninth Junior Brother by the Achievement Hall for clearing the secret realm. I'm definitely not mistaken." Then, as if he was afraid that others would not believe him, he directly asked Zhao Ji, "Sect Master, 2 Vice Sect Masters, several elders, if you don't believe me, you can ask the Achievement Hall Junior Brother who gave out the rewards for clearing the secret realm to come here. He can prove the origin of these pills and spirit herbs." In the face of Chu Zhongyu's request, whether it was Zhao Ji, Sun Lianping, or Gao Wanping, all ignored him. This was because their gazes were attracted by the slowly falling letters and jade slips. Reaching out with his hand, a letter and a jade slip appeared in Zhao Ji's hand. Sun Lianping, Gao Wanping, and Lin Wei reached out with their hands at the same time. However, apart from the Thowling and the Victor, no one noticed that a letter had mysteriously disappeared. Although the letter and jade slip had restrictions, it was not difficult for Zhao Ji and the others to break these restrictions. After they broke the seal and finished reading the contents of the letter and jade slip, Zhao Ji and the others turned their murderous gazes towards Hishuda, who was in Yu Haoran's hands. In addition to anger and killing intent, Lin Wei's eyes were filled with sadness. It was a kind of dejection that made him feel as if his heart had died. Seeing Zhao Ji and the others turn their gazes towards Hishuda, Yu Haoran knew that he had already achieved half of his plan. However, he still needed Hishuda for the remaining half. Therefore, he directly held Hishuda in his hand, blocking the murderous gazes of Zhao Ji and the others. Sect Master, Vice Sect Masters, Peak Master, and Vice Peak Master Lin, what other evidence do you need? Yu Haoran, Hishuda actually dared to launch a sneak attack on a fellow disciple in the sect, and even nearly caused the death of his fellow disciple. According to the sect's laws, his cultivation will be crippled, and he will be locked up in the death row. Taking a deep breath, Zhao Ji suppressed the anger and killing intent in his heart and loudly announced Hishuda's fate. But soon, his tone changed, and there was a faint hint of pleading in it. "However, Yu Haoran, can you hand Hishuda over to me so that I can carry out his punishment?" "No problem." Yu Haoran knew that Zhao Ji wanted to use a soul-searching technique to search for spies hidden in the law enforcement peak or in the 100 Chi Gate, so he did not refuse. This was because searching Hishuda's memories would definitely involve Zhao Xinyu. Yu Haoran wanted to see what Zhao Ji would do. If Zhao Ji could show enough sincerity, not only would he delay the execution of Zhao Xinyu, but he would also use his memories from his previous life to help the sect eliminate some hidden dangers. If Zhao Ji pretended to be deaf and mute, then the life and death of the 100 Chi Gate would have nothing to do with him. Next, he would do his best to help his senior brothers increase their cultivation and strength, and try his best to change his master's opinion of the 100 Chi Gate. At the same time, he would trick those who had helped him in his previous life into joining the Qinyan Peak. When the 100 Chi Gate was destroyed, he would bring the Qinyan faction out of the 100 Chi Gate and find a place with denser spiritual Qi to become a paradise for the Qinyan faction to gain a foothold and rise again. However, before handing Hishuda over to Zhao Ji, he had to wrap things up. Yu Haoran asked as he opened his monkey claws and undid Hishuda's mute acupoint. Hishuda, other than you, there were 7 people who participated in the ambush and sneak attack that day. Now, point them out to me, and I will ask the sect leader to give you a quick death. Zhao Yunfeng, Hishuda, whose face was filled with hatred, pointed at a peak 7th grade martial great master disciple in the crowd with a sinister tone. Ever since he had been captured alive by Yu Haoran and discovered the secret of the storage ear, Hishuda knew that he was completely done for. Therefore, he had no intention of escaping. He only quietly waited for the moment when he would be dealt with. However, after observing Yu Haoran's actions from the sidelines, Hishuda finally realized that the reason he had been captured alive was because he had stood up for his junior brother and ambushed Chu Zhongyu. This caused Hishuda to be filled with hatred for Zhao Yunfeng, who had asked him to help at that time. If not for these people's actions, he definitely would not have ambushed Chu Zhongyu. This was because he did not lack the rewards from the secret territory. If he had not severely injured Chu Zhongyu, he would not have attracted Yu Haoran, who was even more of a demon than a demon. If Yu Haoran had not found trouble with him, not only would Hishuda not have exposed his identity as a spy, but he would also be able to rely on Lin Wei's high opinion of him to quickly raise his cultivation level and gather information for the forces behind him. If all of this was carried out successfully, after the 100 Chi Gate was destroyed in the future, Hishuda, who had been a spy for many years, would not only obtain more cultivation resources, but his status would also be greatly improved. It was precisely because of the hatred in his heart that he did not even think of bargaining when faced with Yu Haoran's request. He pointed out the 7 people who had participated in the ambush that day one by one, trying to escape. Seeing that Zhao Yunfeng had directly soared into the air and wanted to escape from the law enforcement peak, Yu Haoran sneered. He stretched out his hand, and a powerful force directly sucked Zhao Yunfeng into his hand. Then, with a forceful shake, he directly knocked Zhao Yunfeng unconscious. Then, he threw Zhao Yunfeng to Chu Zhongyu and ordered, "Guard him for now. Eldest senior brother, guard them for the time being. After dealing with my conflict with the law enforcement peak, return to Qingyun Peak and deal with these people." Zhu Chang, seeing that Yu Haoran had captured Zhao Yunfeng alive, Hishuda pointed at another disciple who was at the peak of the 7th stage of the martial arts Grandmaster realm. Perhaps knowing that he could not escape, Zhu Chang accepted his fate and was sucked into Yu Haoran's palm and then knocked unconscious. Zhou Lei, sucked into his palm, knocked unconscious, and threw him to Chu Zhongyu and the others. Tian Luo. Hishuda pointed out the 7 people who had participated in the ambush that day. Yu Haoran used the same method to knock them unconscious and threw them to Chu Zhongyu and the others. Hishuda, why do you have to do this? Chapter 149. Enforcer Peak. After sighing, Yu Haoran tossed Hishuda to Zhao Ji and turned his head to look at the courtyard on the peak. His face was pale without a trace of blood, and his body was trembling from fear. Then, Yu Haoran said in an emotionless tone, "Ouyang Haoyu, I've said it from the beginning. Even if all the martial emperors in the sect were to attack, I would destroy your body and soul. Now it's time for you to die. Yu Haoran, the Enforcer Peak, is willing to give you enough resources to satisfy you. Please spare Ouyang Haoyu's life." Just as Yu Haoran was about to kill Ouyang Haoyu, Gao Wanping, who had barely suppressed his mental state due to the loss of his natal weapon, suddenly requested. Following Gao Wanping's request to give up most of the Enforcer Peak's cultivation resources in exchange for Ouyang Haoyu's life, before Yu Haoran could say anything, the tens of thousands of spectating disciples were instantly dissatisfied. Originally, even if they were dissatisfied, under the influence of Gao Wanping's prestige, they would have chosen to remain silent. However, Yu Haoran's words at the beginning seemed to have opened the valve of dissatisfaction in the hearts of countless Enforcer Peak disciples, causing them to be unwilling to remain silent. "Why?" A disciple hidden in the crowd said softly. "Why?" Following that, 5 core disciples who had reached the martial emperor realm shouted loudly. "Why?" Following that, dozens of elite disciples who had reached the martial ancestor realm shouted loudly. Why? Perhaps due to the influence of the core and elite disciples, more and more of the tens of thousands of spectating disciples began to chime in. In the end, not only the enforcer peak disciples, even the deacons, hall masters, and some ordinary elders could not help but question loudly. Are you trying to rebel? Gao Wanping did not expect his subordinates to question him. He could not help but scold them angrily. Peak Master, we know that you value Ouyang Haoyu and want him to inherit your legacy. We have no objections because this is your personal matter, but you have to consider our feelings. Why should he be allowed to use the cultivation resources of the law enforcement peak without limit? Why should he use everyone's cultivation resources in exchange for his life? A core disciple whose talent and potential were second only to Ouyang Haoyu's, whose cultivation was already at the peak of third-grade martial king, and who was the successor of another vice peak master, boldly stood out and loudly questioned. Do I need to ask for your opinion on what I want to do? Gao Wanping coldly glanced at the core disciple who questioned him and reprimanded in a sinister tone. Of course not. However, if you use the resources of the law enforcement peak, then we have the right to question and object. Not fearing the threat in Gao Wanping's sinister tone, the core disciple loudly retorted. After looking at the core disciple with interest, Yu Haoran raised his head and looked at Zhao Ji. Then, he lowered his head and looked at the other vice peak master of the law enforcement peak with a playful smile in his eyes. Just as Yu Haoran was pondering over the internal conflict of the law enforcement peak, Thaling suddenly suggested, Yu Haoran, in a while, agree to Gao Wanping's request and let Ouyang Haoyu go for the time being. No, I can't let Ouyang Haoyu go. Without even considering, Yu Haoran directly refused. Yu Haoran, if you don't want Gao Wanping to disregard everything and fight you to the death, if you don't want to cause internal strife in the entire sect, if you don't want to be able to run amok in the entire sect in the future, then you have to kill Ouyang Haoyu. Seeing that Yu Haoran did not listen to his advice, Thaling angrily criticized. Why? According to his understanding of Thaling, if the matter was not so serious that it could not be controlled, he would not be this angry. Therefore, Yu Haoran did not continue to insist on his opinion and instead asked for the reason. Grafting demonic arts. Without explaining in detail, Thaling only mentioned a long-lost demonic arts secret technique. Thaling, what do you mean? Shifting his gaze from Ouyang Haoyu to Gao Wanping, Yu Haoran gradually understood why Gao Wanping favored Ouyang Haoyu so much. Grafting demonic arts, not to mention the 7 top sects, even those demonic arts experts who specialize in demonic arts might not know what grafting demonic arts was. And very coincidentally, when he ventured into the demon god's ancient tomb, Yu Haoran had accidentally entered the tomb of a demonic arts big shot and obtained the complete version of grafting demonic arts cultivation method from the demonic arts big shot's tomb. Grafting demonic arts referred to the fusion and separation of two people's vitality, talent, potential, perception, perseverance, cultivation, etc., and then the two people would raise their cultivation together. When their cultivation reached a certain limit, the two people would fuse. With the help of the fusion, not only could they directly break through their current cultivation, their talent, potential, perception, perseverance, and vitality would all be greatly increased. However, there was a flaw in grafting demonic arts, and that was that no accidents could happen to the two people who cultivated the secret technique. Otherwise, if one person died, the other would die without a doubt. Unless one of the two people who cultivated the demonic arts wanted to fuse in advance. Only now did Yu Haoran understand why the martial king peak master, Gao Wanping, did not appear when the 100 Chi Gate was besieged. Why did Ouyang Haoyu, who was only a 9th grade martial king, not only safely leave the 100 Chi Gate, but also become famous in such a short period of time? Perhaps the Ouyang Haoyu who escaped the 100 Chi Gate was no longer Ouyang Haoyu, but Gao Wanping, who was a martial king. At the same time, He finally understood why Ouyang Haoyu was so nervous when he saw him after his sect was destroyed and ruthlessly humiliated him. He even sent experts to assassinate him afterwards. Perhaps he was afraid that he would find clues and expose his identity. All right, grafting demonic arts, linking lives. Just as Thowling had said, if he really did kill Ouyang Haoyu, then not only would Gao Wamping attack, he would also fight with his life on the line. Considering that the secret transformation technique was about to end, and that he could not take a second drop of blood essence in his current condition, he could only take a step back for now. However, Gao Wamping's fight with his life on the line was only one of the reasons why Yu Haoran had decided to give up on killing Ouyang Haoyu for now, because he had thought of a plan to kill two birds with one stone. If this plan of killing two birds with one stone succeeded, it would greatly shorten the time he needed to reach the peak of the Martial King realm again. Taking a step back was one thing, but he still had to fight for the benefits. Chapter 150. Enforcer Peak. If you want me to let Ouyang Haoyu go, sure, but you have to agree to two of my requests. Speak. Seeing that Yu Haoran was willing to state his conditions, Gao Wamping could not help but heave a sigh of relief. As long as he could save Ouyang Haoyu's life, he did not care about the opinions of the people in the peak, nor did he care about the loss of the Enforcer Peak. This was because once Ouyang Haoyu's cultivation had broken through to the Martial Emperor realm, he would be able to completely merge with Ouyang Haoyu. At that time, not only would he be able to use the benefits of merging with Ouyang Haoyu to comprehend the soul-severing law in advance, he would also be able to make a name for himself in the Tianxian continent with Ouyang Haoyu's good-looking body. First, give me a special pardon badge from the Enforcer Peak, Yu Haoran said as he extended a finger. The so-called pardon badge was a special badge that the founder of the 100 Chi Gate had specially refined. As long as one was not a traitor like Ishuda, or a traitor who had betrayed the sect, one would have the right to be pardoned regardless of the severity of their crimes. In other words, with the pardon badge, one could basically do whatever they wanted in the sect and commit all sorts of crimes. However, of the two pardon badges, one was in the hands of the Enforcer Peak's Peak Master, and one was in the hands of the Enforcer Peak's Peak Master. Here, after a slight hesitation, Gao Wanping grasped the air, and a badge that emitted a faint pressure appeared in his hand. He then threw it towards Yu Haoran. Seeing that Gao Wanping had given the pardon badge to Yu Haoran, Sun Lianping opened his mouth but did not say a word in the end. Others might not know about his relationship with Ouyang Haoyu, but Sun Lianping knew. This was because he was the one who had imparted the incomplete grafting demonic technique to Gao Wanping. He wanted to use Gao Wanping to test the effects of the grafting demonic technique. If Gao Wanping's experiment was successful, he would choose a disciple who was outstanding in all aspects and perform the grafting demonic technique. If Gao Wanping failed, he would destroy the grafting demonic technique. At the same time, he knew very well that this was only Gao Wanping's stalling tactic. The day Yu Haoran broke through to the Martial Emperor realm would be the day Yu Haoran would be killed. After receiving the pardon token that Gao Wanping threw over, Yu Haoran felt it for a moment and immediately discovered that this token was extraordinary. Although he really wanted to let Thowling examine the token to see what kind of secrets it hid, the current environment was not suitable, so he temporarily put the token in his sleeve. Peak Master, as far as I know, the Law Enforcement Peak's treasury has a total of 5 floors. It contains the cultivation resources that all the disciples of the Law Enforcement Peak need for cultivation, as well as the treasures that the Law Enforcement Peak has accumulated over thousands of years. At this point, Yu Haoran raised his second finger and said, "My second request is to open the entire treasury to me and allow me to stay in the treasury for a day." A day's time was more or less enough for them to explore the entire treasury. Although Yu Haoran was limited by his cultivation and background, and did not have a spatial device that could be used as a storage device, Yu Haoran still had the ability to take away the most precious treasures in the treasury. Therefore, all the people of the Law Enforcement Peak, including the 2 deputy peak masters, were secretly praying that Gao Wanping would not agree. However, Gao Wanping's reply completely disappointed everyone in the law enforcement peak. For the first time, the thought of leaving the law enforcement peak arose in their hearts. All right. This time, Gao Wanping did not even think about it and directly nodded in agreement. I'm tired today. I'll return to Qingyun Peak to rest for a day. I'll be here on time tomorrow morning. I hope Peak Master can make the arrangements in advance. Just as Gao Wanping agreed to the second request, Yu Haoran suddenly felt dizzy. He immediately knew that the secret transformation technique was about to end, so he hurriedly said goodbye. Originally, he was anxious to arrange for Yu Haoran to hide for a period of time, and then he would do his best to tidy up the law enforcement peak to eliminate the people who had lost their support because of Yu Haoran's provocation. Therefore, in the face of Yu Haoran's departure, Gao Wanping immediately nodded in agreement. Tomorrow morning, I'll arrange for Deputy Peak Master Lin Feng to personally bring you to the treasury. In that case, I'll take my leave first. Yu Haoran stomped his left foot on the ground and directly rushed to Chu Zhongyu and the others. Senior brothers, let's go. Seeing that Yu Haoran was leaving first, Chu Zhongyu and the others each carried one or two unconscious disciples of the law enforcement peak and followed Yu Haoran. When they were about to leave the law enforcement peak, Yu Haoran suddenly stopped moving forward. Then, he waved his big hand downward and immediately caught two figures below. 7th Senior Brother, 8th Senior Brother, I'm Yu Haoran. I've solved the matter of the law enforcement peak. Now, I'll take you back to Qingyun Peak. Seeing that the two people who were caught began to attack the giant palm, Yu Haoran hurriedly reminded them. Then, he continued to fly to Qingyun Peak. However, when he was on a mountain road not far from Qingyun Peak, he suddenly saw a person who was emitting red light and whose killing intent was almost tangible. Alas! Looking at the red figure below, step by step, leaving Qingyun Peak, Yu Haoran could not help but sigh. Then he also stretched out his hand and reminded, Zhongjun, I'm Haoran. Now, I'll take you back to Qingyun Peak. When Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu, and the others landed in the courtyard of Qingyun Peak's Hidden Moon Pavilion, before they had time to speak, his body suddenly swayed. Then, his height of more than 60 meters quickly shrank. As his body shrank, Yu Haoran's aura began to weaken. When Yu Haoran returned to his original appearance, a great pain that far exceeded all the pain he had endured in his previous life hit him. Accompanied by the great pain, his bones, meridians, internal organs, and dantian were on the verge of collapse. Without the slightest worry, he directly swallowed a bottle of energy cultivation pills, alchemy body pills, and energy recovery pills that he had prepared beforehand. Then he sat cross-legged on the spot and used the pills to restore the collapse of various organs in his body. Seeing that Yu Haoran had swallowed a large number of pills after the transformation, and his face was very pale, everyone present knew that the side effects of the transformation secret technique had come. Therefore, they held their breaths and tried to keep the surroundings as quiet as possible, giving Yu Haoran ample time and space to heal. After a full 3 hours, with the help of 30 pills and Thowling's secret help, he barely stopped the collapse of various organs in his body. Phew! Opening his eyes, Yu Haoran spat out a mouthful of turbid air that had accumulated in his chest while he was healing his injuries. While he was relieved, he could not help but feel a trace of lingering fear. Although he had used the transformation secret technique more than once in his previous life, when he first used it in his previous life, his cultivation was already at the peak of the 9th rank martial ancestor realm, and the grade of his physical body had also reached the 1st rank of martial master. At the same time, the blood essence he used was only at the early 5th rank, which was the blood essence of a low-level Emperor Realm beast. When he used the transformation secret technique, although he also suffered a backlash, it was only his physical body that showed signs of collapse. But this time, Chapter 151, Clear Cloud Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. 9 Junior Brother, are you alright? Looking at Yu Haoran, who had opened his eyes, but his face was still pale, Chu Zhongyu hurriedly walked in front of him and asked with concern. Eldest Senior Brother, don't worry, I'm fine. Yu Haoran waved his hand and indicated that he was fine. In fact, only he knew the truth. Although the backlash from the secret transformation technique had caused serious injuries to his body and organs, it was still easy to recover with the help of pills. The only troublesome thing was his damaged dantian. According to the condition of his damaged dantian, he would not be able to use the origin energy in his dantian for at least 1 to 2 months. In other words, he could only use the energy of his physical body for the time being. This would be very disadvantageous for the upcoming trip to the Blue Moon Secret Realm. After all, there were a few geniuses in the powerful sects of the 100 Chi Gate and a few other third-rate sects who could challenge those of a higher rank. More importantly, in this trip to the Blue Moon Secret Realm, 2 of the opponents he had originally planned to eliminate in advance were extremely powerful. It would be difficult to defeat them with just the strength of his physical body. Now, he could only hope that the Law Enforcement Peak's treasury would have pills and elixirs that could heal his dantian. Otherwise, he could only temporarily let go of his enemies in this trip to the Blue Moon Secret Realm. Ninth Junior Brother, whether it is now or in the future, as long as you need us, just tell us. Even if we have to risk our lives, we will help you. Although Yu Haoran indicated that he was fine, as someone who was about to break through to the Martial King realm, how could Chu Zhongyu not feel the terrible condition of Yu Haoran's body? Therefore, he hoped that Yu Haoran could explain his situation and ask for what he needed. Then, everyone could think of a solution together. This way, he would be able to alleviate the guilt in his heart. Eldest Senior Brother, I'm really fine. Enduring the intense pain in his body, Yu Haoran stood up and indicated that he was fine. Then he glanced at the 7 people lying side by side and asked, Eldest Senior Brother, other than Ishuda, who was handed over to the sect master, these 7 people were the ones who ambushed you and injured you. How do you plan to deal with them? Faced with Yu Haoran's question, Chu Zhongyu temporarily forgot about Yu Haoran's injuries and revealed a troubled expression. If the 7 of them had shown their skills when they were ambushed that day, it wouldn't have been too much to kill them. However, Chu Zhongyu's personality was gentle, and he wasn't the kind of person who would kill decisively. Seeing his eldest senior brother's hesitation, Yu Haoran could not help but sigh. In this competitive and cruel world, being ruthless was the key to survival. For example, with eldest senior brother's indecisive character, either he was so powerful that no one dared to touch him, or he had the protection of a powerful force. Unfortunately, he did not have either of these 2 things right now, so Yu Haoran could only help him create them. 8th Senior Brother, what do you think? Yu Haoran asked Lin Xian. Kill. This simple word not only expressed Lin Xian's attitude, but also fully demonstrated his decisive and ruthless character. This kind of character was the foundation of true strength, and it was also the key to leading the Qingyun Peak to prosperity in the future. Zhongjun, after you and 8th Senior Brother kill these 7 people, throw their bodies to the back of the mountain to feed the exotic beasts. Hang their heads under the big tree at the entrance of the mountain. I hope that through the heads of these 7 people, everyone in the 100 Chi Gate will know that although Qingyun Peak has few people, we are not to be trifled with. If they dare to provoke Qingyun Peak in the future, these 7 people will end up like them. Yu Haoran ordered with a murderous look. In response to Yu Haoran's murderous order, Wu Zhengjun and Lin Xian did not have any objections. Instead, they went forward to kill Zhao Yunfeng and the others. 9th Junior Brother, isn't this too cruel? Seeing Lin Xian and Wu Zhengjun about to behead the 7 people, Chu Zhongyu couldn't help but advise them. 2nd Senior Brother, Lu Guangwei, also couldn't bear it. Eldest Senior Brother, there are some things that I don't want to say. I just hope that you can remember one thing. That is, being lenient to the enemy is being cruel to yourself. After saying this, Yu Haoran dragged his tired body out of the Hidden Moon Pavilion and rushed to the Peace Residence. Although Feng Qingyun didn't show up, Yu Haoran knew that he must be secretly protecting him. What's more, he was able to survive Ouyang Haoyu's first sneak attack because of the life-saving jade pendant that Feng Qingyun gave him. Logically speaking, he needed to explain everything that happened in the law enforcement peak to his master, and he also needed to thank his master. When Yu Haoran arrived at the peace residence, he found that the door was already open. He immediately knew that his master was waiting for him. Therefore, he didn't make a request and directly stepped into the peace residence. Haoran, master was wrong. When Yu Haoran arrived in front of Feng Qingyun, who was sitting cross-legged on the futon, directly admitted his mistake. Master, Feng Qingyun's attitude of admitting his mistake scared Yu Haoran. He quickly wanted to refute and comfort him. However, Feng Qingyun shook his head and stopped him from refuting and comforting him. He continued to say, Haoran, no matter what you want to do in the future, Master will unconditionally support you. Raising his head to look at Feng Qingyun, Yu Haoran vaguely saw a flash of sadness between his master's eyebrows. He guessed the reason for his master's change in attitude. The Achievement Hall was responsible for distributing more than 100,000 disciples, deacons, hall masters, and elders. Not only was it not fair, but it also secretly deducted the disciples' benefits, intercepted the sect's resources, and secretly communicated with the sect's enemies. The law enforcement peak's most promising disciple, Hishuda, who was highly regarded by the Vice Peak Master Lin Wei, not only ambushed his eldest disciple, but was also a spy arranged by the enemy sect. After returning to the sect, the scandals of the sect and the hidden dangers of the sect caused Feng Qingyun to be very disappointed in the sect. He was gradually changing his attitude towards the sect. Feng Qingyun's change made Yu Haoran very happy. Haoran, your injuries are not light. Feng Qingyun did not want to dwell on the reason for his change in attitude, so he changed the topic to Yu Haoran, a 9th-grade martial warrior who can use the blood essence of a strange beast to erupt with the strength of a peak 4th-grade martial king. The consequences are not serious, but it will be a problem. Yu Haoran shrugged and said indifferently, Haoran, your physical injuries are very easy to heal, but your dantian is damaged. I'm afraid it will be more troublesome to heal. After all, the sect does not have many pills that can heal dantians. Although Yu Haoran's attitude was indifferent, Feng Qingyun could not ignore it. If he was willing to help at that time, with his cultivation of a martial saint, even if all the martial kings of the 100 Qi Gate worked together, they would not be a match for him. This way, Yu Haoran would not have to take the risk of using the secret transformation technique and would not have to suffer the backlash of the secret transformation technique. Chapter 152. Qingyun Peak, Upright Residence. Yu Haoran agreed with Feng Qingyun's words. Not to mention the 100 Qi Gate, even in the top sects, there were pitifully few elixirs that could be used to heal the dantian and the soul. This was also why he was worried that after the Blue Moon Mystery Realm opened, he would not be able to traverse the entire Mystery Realm in his current state. How about this? I have a few 7th-level elixirs that can heal physical injuries. You can use these elixirs to heal your physical injuries first. As for the injuries to your dantian, I'll think of a way. If one were to ask which power in the Tianxian continent had the most and most comprehensive elixirs, it would be the Medicine Master Valley. Therefore, Feng Qingyun planned to make a trip to the Medicine Master Valley within 10 days of the Blue Moon Mystery Realm opening to see if he could exchange for elixirs to heal the dantian. Master, there's no need to worry about my injuries. I have a way to heal the damaged dantian. Yu Haoran consoled. Of course, Yu Haoran's consolation was not empty words. This was because in the Blue Moon Mystery Realm that was about to open, there was a 1,000-year-old elixir that was specially used to consolidate and repair the dantian that was about to mature. With the efficacy of that elixir, it was enough to heal his damaged dantian by more than 70%. Unfortunately, that elixir would only mature on the 9th day of the Mystery Realm's opening and truly display the efficacy of repairing the dantian. Therefore, for most of the Mystery Realm's opening, he could only use his physical strength to explore. In this way, it would not only affect his treasure hunt, it would also affect his revenge. Yu Haoran's guarantee did not make Feng Qingyun give up on the idea of going to the Medicine Master Valley to seek the elixir. However, he did not say anything more and only urged Yu Haoran to rest well so that he could participate in the Blue Moon Mystery Realm that would open in 3 days. After leaving the upright residence, Yu Haoran went directly to the quiet residence to find Chu Zhongyu and asked him to bring him to the disciplinary peak tomorrow. After all, the elixir in the Blue Moon Mystery Realm was only a backup. He still hoped to find elixirs that could heal his dantian in a short period of time from the disciplinary peak's treasury. The night passed peacefully. With the help of spirit stones and 7th-grade pills, after a night of recuperation, the injuries caused by the backlash of the Vajra monkey's blood essence had recovered by 80%. With his current recovery speed, when the Blue Moon Secret Realm officially opens, his physical body will be completely healed. At that time, relying on the physical body of a peak 9th-grade martial warrior, there will be at most a dozen people in the Blue Moon Secret Realm that can threaten him. After finishing his cultivation, Yu Haoran saw that his eldest senior brother Chu Zhongyu was already waiting for him in the courtyard. "Good morning, eldest senior brother," Yu Haoran greeted as he walked towards Chu Zhongyu. "Ninth junior brother, how are your injuries?" Chu Zhongyu asked with concern when he saw that Yu Haoran was in good spirits. "Not bad." Nodding, Yu Haoran didn't explain too much about his recovery. He didn't want to arouse Chu Zhongyu's concern, and he didn't want him to feel too guilty. "Eldest senior brother, let's go." In the trip to the Blue Moon Secret Realm, whether or not he could display his prowess would depend on whether or not the law enforcement peak's treasury had pills and elixirs that could restore his dantian. Therefore, Yu Haoran was anxious to enter the law enforcement peak's treasury. Grabbing Yu Haoran's arm, Chu Zhongyu directly brought Yu Haoran to the law enforcement peak. Law enforcement peak. At the location of yesterday's fierce battle, Deputy Peak Master Lin Wei had been standing there since yesterday, staring blankly at the sky. Ishuda. Ever since he recruited Ishuda into the law enforcement peak, he had taken a liking to this disciple with outstanding talent and potential. He was a warm and generous person who was willing to help others. As the first Deputy Peak Master of the law enforcement peak, Lin Wei had very high requirements for disciples who could inherit his legacy. Talent and potential were important, but temperament was even more important. Ishuda was able to become his disciple in the end. It was a cautious decision made after years of secret observation and careful consideration. However, he did not expect that his many years of observation was just a joke. Not only was his most valued disciple a treacherous and cunning person, but he was also a spy planted in the sect by a hostile force. This made him deeply reproach himself. Therefore, when sect leader Zhao Ji asked for Ishuda yesterday, he did not plead on behalf of his disciple. The law enforcement peak oversaw the entire sect's laws and regulations and adhered to the principles of fairness and justice. They tried their best not to let off a bad person and not to wrongly accuse a good person. As the Deputy Peak Master whose authority was second only to Gao Wanping, if he made such a fatal mistake regarding his disciple, what ability did he have and what face did he have to continue staying in the position of Deputy Peak Master? At this moment, Lin Wei already had thoughts of retreating. Moreover, after resigning from the position of Deputy Peak Master, he had even thought of a place where he would retire. That was the Beastmaster Peak, where there was no power struggle. However, before resigning from the position of Deputy Peak Master, there was one last thing he needed to do. That was to bring Yu Haoran to the law enforcement peak's treasury and collect treasure from the treasury to temporarily resolve the grudge between Yu Haoran and the law enforcement peak. Chu Zhongyu, Yu Haoran. Greetings, Deputy Peak Master Lin. Chu Zhongyu, who had advanced in his cultivation, was not only more powerful, but his flying speed had also increased significantly. In less than 5 minutes, they had successfully arrived at the law enforcement peak. After seeing Lin Wei standing on the ruins of yesterday's fierce battle, Chu Zhongyu brought Yu Haoran directly to Lin Wei and bowed respectfully. Although Lin Wei was the first senior member of the law enforcement peak to make a move in yesterday's fierce battle, Yu Haoran did not hate him very much. After all, it was not his intention that Lin Wei made a move. He had no choice but to obey Gao Wanping's orders. Let's go. After taking a look at Yu Haoran, Lin Wei did not say much. He turned around and led Yu Haoran and Chu Zhongyu to the law enforcement peak's treasury. After thinking for a long time, Yu Haoran did not say much in the end. This was because he realized that there was something wrong with Lin Wei's mental state. He gave off a feeling that he had seen through the world of mortals and that nothing could affect his state of mind. This feeling was either that of comprehending a profound law and breaking through to the martial sage realm, or of being completely disheartened and no longer being involved in the world of mortals. It was impossible for Lin Wei to be in the first state. Even if his mental state cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds because of yesterday's incident, he was still limited by his own cultivation. It was impossible for him to break through to the martial sage realm in such a short period of time. Lin Wei's current state could only be the second one, being completely disheartened. If it was really the second state, Lin Wei's life would most likely be ruined. This was the greatest punishment for a martial artist who was about to break through to the martial royal realm. In the future, it was not impossible for him to comprehend the power of law and become a martial sage. Yu Haoran did not want to see Lin Wei sink into despair. He wanted to change Lin Wei's mentality. In other words, he wanted to rope Lin Wei into the Qingyun Peak. Chapter 153. The Enforcer Peak. As one of the most important forbidden areas of the Enforcer Peak, the treasury was located at the border between the courtyard and the core disciples' residential area. It was a place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. Under Lin Wei's lead, Yu Haoran and Chu Zhongyu quickly arrived at the treasury. After estimating the distance between the treasury and the peak, Yu Haoran could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, when they had attacked the mountain peak, they had only destroyed the mountain peak's formation and a portion of the buildings. Otherwise, based on the distance between the mountain peak and the mountain peak, completely destroying the mountain peak would definitely have affected the entire mountain peak. It was very likely that a portion of the mountain peak would have been destroyed in yesterday's fierce battle. Arriving in front of the treasury, Lin Wei took out 3 strangely shaped keys from his sleeves and inserted them into 3 special keyholes on the treasury's door. Turning the 3 keys, the sturdy door of the treasury slowly opened. However, the expected phenomenon of dense spiritual energy gushing out did not happen. Yu Haoran knew that the seemingly ordinary treasury actually had another universe inside. In fact, it was very normal. After all, the Enforcer Peak was one of the strongest factions in the 100 Qi Gate. How could the treasury used to store precious treasures be the same as the treasury of an ordinary faction? Since the Peak Master agreed to your request yesterday, the 3 keys that can be used to open the treasury are all with me. Therefore, you don't have to worry about someone taking away the treasures in the treasury. Seeing Yu Haoran standing in front of the treasury in a daze, Lin Wei hurriedly explained, thinking that the ordinary treasury had caused Yu Haoran to misunderstand. I don't believe in Gao Wanping, but I believe in you. Turning around, Yu Haoran's attitude was very serious. Then he instructed Chu Zhongyu, eldest senior brother, Yu, and Vice Peak Master Lin temporarily guard outside. 9 junior brother, don't worry and go in. Nodding his head, Chu Zhongyu glanced at Lin Wei, indicating that he understood. Seeing that Chu Zhongyu had misunderstood his meaning, Yu Haoran could only shake his head and smile bitterly, but he did not say anything. If they wanted to persuade Lin Wei and rope him in, they had to rely on eldest senior brother's straightforward personality and eloquence to turn a good thing into a bad thing. Therefore, Yu Haoran could only smile apologetically at Lin Wei and step into the treasury. From the outside, Yu Haoran was incapable of sensing the extraordinariness of the treasure house. However, when he stepped inside, he was shocked by the worldly spiritual energy that filled the first floor of the treasure house. If the spiritual energy in a place was concentrated to a certain extent, it would reach the state of vaporization. In other words, one would be able to see the existence of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with the naked eye. And in the first level of the law enforcement peak's treasury, the density of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had already reached a level where it could be seen with the naked eye. Yu Haoran observed the first floor of the treasury while feeling the rich spiritual chi of heaven and earth. He discovered that the collection of the Law Enforcement Peak's treasury was similar to other treasury vaults. The first floor was filled with spirit stones. Yu Haoran could not help but sigh as he looked at the nearly 100 wooden shelves on the first level of the treasury, where thousands of chests filled with energy stones were neatly arranged. This was the difference. This was the disparity. In the Qingyun Peak, as the eldest senior brother of the Qingyun faction, Chu Zhongyu's cultivation was already at the peak of the 9th level of the martial Great Realm. However, the spirit stones that he usually used when meditating were only 9th level spirit stones. Unless he had a breakthrough in his cultivation, he would be slightly extravagant in using 8th level spirit stones. And in the first level of the Law Enforcement Peak's treasury, the lowest grade spirit stones were 8th level, first grade spirit stones. Furthermore, there were not many of them, less than 100 chests. Most of the remaining spirit stones were 7th level and 6th level spirit stones. Furthermore, the quantity of these two types of spirit stones accounted for almost 3/4 of the total amount of spirit stones in the treasury. As for the higher grade 5th level spirit stones, although most of them were 5th level, 1st grade, and 3rd grade spirit stones, to Yu Haoran, who was in the martial warrior realm, they were undoubtedly the best elixirs and miraculous medicines. After yesterday's conflict, as well as the special relationship between Gao Wamping and Ouyang Haoyu, Yu Haoran knew that he would not be able to reconcile with the Law Enforcement Peak in the future. Hence, he did not need to give any face to the Law Enforcement Peak. Therefore, his consciousness informed Thaling, and Yu Haoran began the craziest sweep since his rebirth. Nearly 200 square meters of storage space could not hold too many spirit stones, so Yu Haoran only selected 30 chests of 8th level and 9th level spirit stones, 20 chests of 7th level and 9th level spirit stones, 10 chests of 6th level and 9th level spirit stones, and 1 chest of 5th level and 1st grade spirit stones, according to his temporary needs. As for the remaining spirit stones, they were all temporarily placed in the Victor. Yu Haoran, aren't you being a bit too ruthless? Looking at the empty first level of the treasury, even the knowledgeable Thaling could not help but remind him with a guilty conscience. Ruthless? Yu Haoran retorted. In his previous life, due to the lack of cultivation resources, he had a near-morbid craze for every type of resource that could increase his cultivation and aid his cultivation. Not to mention the mid-grade spirit stones in the treasury. Even if it was the lowest grade 10th level spirit stones, he would absolutely not let go of them. Furthermore, Qingyun Peak, which was lacking in resources, needed these spirit stones even more. Therefore, the reason why he emptied the first level of the treasury, other than his own personality, was because he wanted to increase the strength of Qingyun Peak. After checking again to make sure that he did not miss anything, Yu Haoran walked up the stairs to the second level of the treasury. Just as he entered the second room of the treasury, a strong medicinal fragrance assaulted his senses. Looking around, Yu Haoran discovered that the second level of the treasury was divided into 2 areas. In one area, there were more than 10 wooden shelves, and on the wooden shelves were neatly arranged thousands of pill bottles. At the same time, at the bottom of each pill bottle, the type, grade, and effect of the pill was written in detail. On the shelves in the other area, there were wooden, jade, stone, and even iron wooden boxes. At the bottom of each box, the name, grade, and effect of the spiritual medicine in the box were also written. After a general observation, Yu Haoran first began to look at the area where the pills were placed. Training Qi pill, returning Qi pill, refining Qi pill, condensing Qi pill. He looked through them from beginning to end, and most of the pills were tested by their color, medicinal fragrance, and size. In the end, he only took a portion of the pills that were of higher quality or could be used to supplement the needs of the senior brothers of Qingyun Peak. As for the rest of the pills, they were left on the shelves. He did not take all of them away like he did with the spirit stones because Yu Haoran did not care about these pills, or rather, he did not care about the pill refiner standards. Although he was not strong now, as long as his cultivation broke through to the martial master realm, he would be able to use his elemental energy to support his alchemic fire. Then, the pills he refined, whether in quality or effect, would be far superior to the pills on the shelves. Moreover, the quality of the pills had a great impact on the improvement of one's cultivation and foundation. Unless there was no other choice, Yu Haoran did not want to use pills of average quality. Chapter 154. The Enforcer Peak's Treasury. Yu Haoran stepped onto the third floor after making sure he hadn't missed anything on the second floor. However, as soon as he stepped onto the third floor, he was dazzled by the dazzling lights that kept flashing in the treasury. After his eyes adjusted to his surroundings, Yu Haoran discovered that the third floor of the treasury was also divided into two areas. One of the areas had shelves, platforms, jade platforms, and wooden stakes. Regardless of whether it was shelves, platforms, jade platforms, or wooden stakes, they were either placed on top of them or placed on top of them. Upon closer inspection, Yu Haoran discovered that none of the weapons on the third floor were ordinary. Even the lowest grade was a low-grade Grandmaster Realm Magic weapon. Instead, there was a jade platform in the center of the treasury that supported a low-grade Emperor Realm sword that emitted traces of a martial Emperor's aura. Lin Wei, the Enforcer Peak's Vice Peak Master, was currently using a high-grade Emperor Realm Magic weapon. However, there was a low-grade Emperor Realm sword lying idle in the Enforcer Peak's treasury. Yu Haoran realized how terrifying Gao Luanping's control over the Enforcer Peak was, and how selfish and harsh he was to his subordinates. If he wanted to rope Lin Wei in, besides resolving the knot in his heart caused by Hishuda being a traitor, he also needed a treasure that could move Lin Wei. The low-grade Emperor Realm sword in front of him was a treasure that could move Lin Wei. After careful counting, Yu Haoran discovered that there were about 43 Grandmaster Realm Magic weapons and 13 Emperor Realm Magic weapons on the third floor of the treasury. As for the only Emperor Realm Magic weapon, the sword on the jade platform was the only one. Considering the strength of his senior brothers from the Clear Cloud faction, the current grade and quantity of magic weapons were enough for them to use. Therefore, after gesturing for Thaling to put away all the magic weapons, Yu Haoran began to observe the messy piles of refining materials in another area. In his previous life, Yu Haoran wasn't very familiar with the way of refining, nor did he know much about the types of refining materials. Therefore, in the face of the hundreds and thousands of refining materials in front of him, he was too lazy to check them one by one. For the time being, he did not want to know their uses. Similarly, he had Thaling put them all away. Thaling, how much space does Victor have left? How many more things can it store? After Thaling stored all the refining materials into the Victor, Yu Haoran suddenly recalled the time he had spent cultivating in the Victor. According to his own experience, Victor's space wasn't that big. It was at most 500 to 600 square meters. Therefore, he was worried that there would be no more space in the Victor after collecting so many things. Yu Haoran, don't worry. Hearing that Yu Haoran was actually worried about the Victor's space, Thaling felt that it was ridiculous. Not to mention these things, even if you wanted to put the entire 100 Chi Gate, or even the entire mountain range into the Victor, there wouldn't be any problems. Of course, the prerequisite is that you have enough strength to move these things. Hearing that the Victor could fit the entire mountain range, Yu Haoran was shocked and couldn't help but mock himself. After all, the Victor's origins were mysterious. What he had seen during his cultivation in the Victor was only the tip of the iceberg. It was normal for it to be able to fit the entire mountain range. Since he didn't have to worry about the Victor's space being insufficient, Yu Haoran continued to walk into the fourth floor of the treasury. Following that, he smelled a rich fragrance of calligraphy. Looking up, he discovered that the fourth floor of the treasury was a whole and wasn't separated into different areas. On the dozen or so wooden shelves were either books of varying thickness or jade slips of different colors. Compared to the number of books, there were far fewer jade slips. Even without looking, Yu Haoran knew that the books and jade slips on the wooden shelves recorded the martial skills, mental cultivation methods, and secret techniques collected by Enforcer Peak. Although he himself didn't lack top-notch martial skills and cultivation methods, considering the scarcity of martial skills collected by Clear Cloud Peak, these mental cultivation methods and martial skills could be supplemented. Therefore, he was too lazy to look through them one by one. He still had Thowling put them all away and help him classify them so that he could store them in Clear Cloud Peak's treasury. After taking away all the martial skills, mental cultivation methods, and secret techniques, Howard began to look for the stairs to the 5th floor of the treasury. But after going back and forth 3 times, he didn't find any entrance to the 5th floor of the treasury. From the outside, the entire treasury did indeed have 5 floors, but he couldn't find the entrance to the 5th floor. This could only mean 2 things. Either the 5th floor was a solid decoration, or the 5th floor was concealed by an array. Thinking of this, Howard began to search carefully, but no matter how carefully he searched, he still couldn't find any clues about an array. In desperation, he could only ask Thowling for help. Using divine thought to search back and forth 3 times, Thowling also didn't find any array or mechanism. In other words, the 5th floor of Enforcer Peak's treasury was actually an ornament. After coming to this conclusion, Howard couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Originally, he wanted to look for pills or elixirs that could repair Dantian in the treasury, but in the end, he found nothing. This made Howard feel a little disappointed. But no matter how disappointed he was, he couldn't change the reality. Sigh. With a sigh, Howard walked down the stairs to the 3rd floor. But just as he walked down the stairs to the 3rd floor, he suddenly had a strange feeling in his heart. He felt that something was wrong. He took another look at the stairs that he had just walked down, then used the speed of wind walk to observe the stairs that led from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor, and from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor. At this moment, he finally understood what was wrong. That was, on the corner of the staircase that led to the 4th floor, there was an extra round ball. Originally, he thought that the ball was just an ornament, so he didn't pay much attention to it first. However, among the 3 staircases that led to the 4th floor, only the 3rd staircase had an extra round ball that seemed to be an ornament, but was actually a little redundant. This proved that the round ball was definitely not normal. He approached it and observed it carefully, reaching out, pinching, pushing, pressing, patting, and taking. Howard realized that he might have been too suspicious and that the round ball was just an ordinary ornament. Shaking his head and putting away his disappointment, Howard planned to leave. But just as he was about to leave, Thowling in his sea of consciousness suddenly said, Howard, directly pick up the round ball and return to the 4th floor of the treasury. Thowling's seemingly inexplicable suggestion didn't make Howard feel the slightest bit strange. He also didn't ask Thowling the reason for doing so. Then, he forcefully took the round ball and returned to the 4th floor of the treasury. Chapter 155. Enforcer Peak, Treasure House. Returning to the 4th floor of the treasure house, Howard stood in the middle of the treasure house. He raised his head and carefully observed for a while. Finally, he found a faint semicircular recess on the wall of the top floor. The size of the recess was about the same as the ball in his hand. Channeling his primary energy, Howard gently leaped and then accurately pressed the ball in his hand into the recess. When he landed again, he was surprised to find that the wall above his head slowly cracked open a gap big enough for a person to pass through. Without taking the risk of going in, Howard first let Thowling use his divine sense to check. Howard, the most precious treasures in the entire treasure house are actually in the level above your head. Through his divine sense, Thowling could not help but sigh. Then, he indicated that there was no danger in the treasure house above, and that Howard could go in directly. With a light leap, Howard entered the 5th floor of the treasure house through the gap above his head. The 5th floor of the treasure house was not big. It was only about 300 to 400 square meters. Moreover, there were not many treasures in the space, only 7 of them. However, after seeing the shape and use of these 7 treasures, Howard agreed with Thowling's words. Any one of these 7 treasures was more precious than all the treasures in the 4th floor of the treasure house. The first treasure on the left side of the treasure house was 9 spirit stones the size of an adult's fist. The color was close to transparent. Unlike spirit stones of the 5th level and below, due to the flaw in the seal of spirit stones, the spirit inside the spirit stone was in a constant state of leakage. Therefore, the grade of the spirit stone could be determined by the leakage of spirit energy. However, spirit stones of the 4th level and above would have a perfect seal. In other words, it would not leak a trace of spirit energy and could perfectly retain the spirit energy in the spirit stone. Howard took a few steps and arrived in front of the 9 spirit stones. He picked up one of them and carefully sensed the spirit energy inside the spirit stone. However, he discovered that his mind was actually unable to enter the spirit stone. He immediately knew the grade of this spirit stone. It was just as he had guessed. It was a spirit stone that had reached the 4th level or above. Due to the unique sealing properties of 4th grade spirit stones and above, in order to guide the spirit energy out of the spirit stone, one must use one's soul to do so. Therefore, even though these 9 spiritual stones were of a very high grade, he was temporarily unable to use them before his cultivation reached the martial ancestor realm. Howard wasn't upset at all. To other warriors, the martial ancestor realm might be an extremely difficult realm. However, to him, it was not difficult at all. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to further strengthen his foundation and to have a better understanding of his yuan power, physical body, meridians, and other details in each realm, he could have raised his cultivation to the martial ancestor realm within a few months. Therefore, these 9 4th-level spirit stones would quickly become the energy that he needed to raise his cultivation and strength. Howard, these 9 spirit stones have already reached the 4th level, 3rd grade. Even the top sects, they're considered very precious spirit stones. Falling's tone was also somewhat excited as he introduced them. Howard was unable to check the true grade of the spirit stones because of his cultivation. However, Falling could easily check the true grade of the spirit stones. After confirming the true grade of the spirit stones, Howard directly put the 9 4th level, 3rd grade spirit stones into his storage ear. Although he believed that Falling wouldn't privately use these 9 spirit stones, considering the preciousness of the 4th level spirit stones and Falling's excitement just now, he had to be careful and hold back. Fortunately, among the 7 treasures on the 5th level of the treasury, the value of the spirit stones was the lowest. Therefore, Falling's divine sense directly focused on the 2nd treasure and didn't notice Howard's little trick. Otherwise, he would definitely harshly criticize Howard for measuring the heart of a gentleman with one's own yardstick. After keeping the spirit stones, Howard's gaze turned to the 2nd treasure next to the spirit stones. It was a jade box. Not only was the jade box tightly closed, but there was also a talisman at the jade box's seal that was used to prevent divine sense from checking. Reaching out to remove the talisman, Howard carefully opened the box. An adult's finger was reflected in front of his eyes. How is this possible? After seeing the finger in the jade box, Falling couldn't help but exclaim, "Falling, what's wrong? What's the origin of this finger?" To be able to shock the knowledgeable Falling, it was enough to show that the origin of this finger in the jade box was extraordinary. Howard immediately wanted to know the origin of this finger. Sigh. Glancing at the finger in the jade box, Falling couldn't help but sigh and fall into his memories. Howard, regarding the true origin of this finger, I can't tell you for the time being. However, I can remind you that the owner of this finger is an expert with the cultivation of Emperor Wu. Moreover, he is an extreme expert at the peak of the 9th level of the Emperor Wu. What? The finger of an extreme expert at the peak of the 9th level of the Emperor Wu. Hearing Falling say that the finger in the jade box was not only the finger of an Emperor Wu, but also the finger of an extreme expert at the peak of the 9th level of the Emperor Wu who had reached the peak of martial arts and was about to break away from a mortal body, Howard was so shocked that he directly took 2 steps back. However, immediately after, he raised a different opinion. No, Falling, if this finger belonged to an expert at the Emperor Wu, then not to mention this jade box which can barely be considered precious, Even a magic weapon with a storage space would not be able to withstand the power unintentionally emitted by an expert at the Emperor Wu. Therefore, how could this finger without a trace of energy be left behind by an expert at the Emperor Wu? In his previous life, although he had never seen an expert at the level of the Emperor Wu, he was fortunate enough to see the life Emperor weapon left behind by an expert at the Emperor Wu level. At that time, the Emperor-level magic weapon had not been activated. It was only enshrined by a certain force. He had only taken a glance at it from a few miles away. Even so, the Emperor's power unintentionally emitted by the Emperor-level magic weapon had shaken him to the point where he spat out blood and his mind was severely injured. After that, he had to recuperate for nearly 3 months before his mind could be considered fully recovered. This is a sealed finger. To seal its power, I'm afraid you'll have to wait until your cultivation has broken through the level of the Emperor Wu and reached the 7th level of the Emperor Wu level before you have the ability and qualifications to unlock the seal and understand the true origin of this Emperor Wu. In the face of Yu Haoran's doubts, Thowling was not angry, nor did he refute. He still explained in a complicated tone. After reclosing the box and sealing the talisman, Yu Haoran directly motioned for Thowling to put away the jade box. He needed to break through the level of the peak of the 7th level of the Emperor Wu level before he could understand the true origin of the finger and the reason why it was sealed. Thowling's explanation immediately made Yu Haoran lose interest. Not to mention the level of the peak of the 7th level of the Emperor Wu level, he did not even have enough confidence to break through the level of the Martial Venerable level, and when he would be able to do so. Therefore, how could he be interested in this finger that he might not be able to use in his lifetime? Chapter 156. Enforcer Peak, 5th floor of the Treasury. The third treasure was a pitch-black stick with an ordinary appearance. It looked like a stick used by ordinary people to cook. However, since Gao Wanping placed it on the 5th floor of the Treasury and placed it behind Emperor Wu's finger, it was clear that it was not an ordinary iron stick. Reaching out to pick up the iron stick, he first weighed it and found that the weight of the iron stick was much lighter than normal. Holding the two ends of the iron stick, he bent it bit by bit. He found that the iron stick was not only light, but also flexible. However, there were many weapons made of this material in the Tianxin continent, so he did not see the uniqueness of this iron stick. Yu Haoran separate a trace of the Vajra monkey's blood essence and drip it on the iron stick. Due to the special origin of the finger, Thowling's mind had been immersed in his memories, so he did not notice the iron stick at first. It was not until Yu Haoran began to bend the iron stick that he came back to his senses and vaguely guessed the origin of this iron stick. Yu Haoran separated a trace of the Vajra monkey's blood essence that was nourished in his meridians. He planned to listen to Thowling's advice and drip it on the iron stick. However, just as the trace of Vajra monkey's blood essence left his body, the iron stick in his hand suddenly shone with a golden light. At the same time, a trace of extremely scorching heat rose from the iron stick. Fortunately, with his 9th-grade martial warrior body, he was able to withstand this scorching heat. The trace of Vajra monkey's blood essence that left his body seemed to have a consciousness. It desperately wanted to break away from Yu Haoran's control and merge with the shining iron stick. Fortunately, the separated blood essence was very little, making it difficult for it to break away from Yu Haoran's control. Just as Yu Haoran was trying to control the separated blood essence, Thowling suddenly told him to take it back. Yu Haoran, take back that trace of blood essence. After Yu Haoran took back the separated blood essence, the shining iron stick immediately returned to its original pitch-black appearance. Moreover, the scorching heat rising from the iron rod instantly disappeared. Yu Haoran, now you have another trump card that can save your life and even turn the tables, Thowling said enviously as he looked at the iron rod that had returned to its original state. Because he realized that Yu Haoran's luck was heaven-defying. The blood ginseng and earth ginseng didn't count because he had the memories of his previous life. He knew the exact location of the blood ginseng and earth ginseng, and he also knew the exact time when the two spiritual herbs would mature. However, each of the 9 4th-tier, third-grade spiritual stones was extremely precious. Not to mention a second-tier sect like the 100 Chi Gate. Even in a top-tier sect, only a martial emperor expert might have 1 or 2 spiritual stones. Although Emperor Wu's finger was sealed, the nomological power that had been integrated into the finger could save Yu Haoran's life if he encountered any danger that he couldn't resist. The ordinary-looking iron rod in front of him was a legendary magic weapon, a divine weapon that symbolized supremacy among monkey-type monsters. Therefore, how could Thaling not be envious of Yu Haoran's heaven-defying luck? Thaling, where did this iron rod come from? Why was the diamond monkey's blood essence able to change it? Hearing that this iron rod could be his life-saving trump card, Yu Haoran immediately asked with great interest. What was a trump card? It was a method that could surpass one's own strength. It had never been used before, and no one knew about it. This iron rod is called As I Wish Rod. It was once the natal magic weapon of a monkey-type monster in the near ancient era. The natal magic weapon of a monkey-type monster. Hearing Thaling say that the ordinary-looking iron rod in his hand was actually the natal magic weapon of a monkey-type monster, Yu Haoran was so scared that he almost dropped the iron rod in his hand. Monster cultivator was a term used in the near ancient era. Now, monster cultivators were the strange beasts, the countless strange beasts in the Tianxian continent. The monkey-type monster was equivalent to a second-level strange beast, which was the Emperor Wu among human warriors. According to Yu Haoran's understanding, not only did the Emperor Wu not exist in the Tianxian continent, there were no second-level strange beasts either. Therefore, when he heard that this was an emperor weapon once used by a second-level strange beast, how could Yu Haoran not be shocked and nervous? Don't worry, As I Wish Rod suffered unimaginable damage during the Great Calamity in the near ancient era. Now, not only has its weapon spirit been destroyed, but its quality has also been reduced to that of an upper-level magic weapon of the king's domain. Motioning Yu Haoran not to make a fuss, Thaling further explained the situation of As I Wish Rod. So it's only an upper-level magic weapon of the king's domain. Hearing that the iron rod in his hand had been reduced to an upper-level magic weapon of the king's domain, Yu Haoran immediately breathed a sigh of relief. The excitement in his heart also calmed down in an instant. Although an upper-level magic weapon of the king's domain was very precious, there were 4 magic weapons of this level among the magic weapons obtained from the 3rd floor of the treasure house just now. Moreover, one of them was a sword of the highest level of the king's domain, which happened to be suitable for him to temporarily serve as his magic weapon after he broke through the martial Guru realm. Therefore, in the face of the downgraded iron rod, Yu Haoran, who had lost interest, directly motioned Thaling to put it away. Seeing that Yu Haoran had completely lost interest, Thaling adjusted his mentality and teased him. Boy, don't regret it. Thaling, can you finish some words in one breath? Don't leave the other half unfinished. Thaling's teasing tone made Yu Haoran realize that the downgraded iron rod must be extraordinary. He couldn't help complaining to Thaling. Huh. In the face of Yu Haoran's teasing, Thaling just chuckled and ignored it. Then he began to explain the special ability of the iron rod. If it's only used by human warriors, it's at most an upper-level magic weapon of the king's domain, and it's difficult to restore it to an emperor weapon even after millions of years. But if it's used by a monkey-type demonic beast, as the descendant of a monkey-type demonic cultivator, it can completely exert the power of an upper-level magic weapon of the emperor realm. Yu Haoran, when you comprehend the power of laws and your cultivation breaks through the martial sage realm, you can use the secret method to use the blood essence of monkey-type demonic beasts above the 4th level. By then, the As I Wish will be able to exert the power of an upper-level saint realm or an upper-level venerable realm. It's even possible to restore it to the original emperor realm and regenerate its weapon spirit. What should we do now? Yu Haoran asked in a trembling voice. Yu Haoran wouldn't consider anything above the saint realm for the time being. However, the power of an upper-level magic weapon of the emperor realm was what really tempted him. If he had the As I Wish in his battle with Gao Wanping yesterday, He could have relied on the might of this upper-level magic weapon to forcefully destroy the heaven-covering bowl. In that case, the commotion caused by the battle would have been even more intense. Howren, the As I Wish is a magic weapon that can be big or small, thick or thin, and can freely change its shape. You only need to stimulate a trace of energy from the Vajra monkey's blood essence, and the As I Wish will automatically enter the acupoints that nourish the blood essence. Chapter 157. Enforcer Peak on the 5th floor of the Treasury. After listening to Thaling's explanation, Howren directly activated a trace of energy in the Vajra monkey's blood essence in his meridians. The moment the blood essence was activated, the iron rod in his hand turned into a tiny silver needle and entered the Vajra monkey's blood essence in his meridians through his pores. Thaling, without the activation of the Vajra monkey's blood essence, the Like My Intentions rod would at most be a magic weapon of the upper level of the king's domain. With Gao Wanping's strength and insight, he shouldn't have placed the Like My Intentions rod in such a hidden 5th floor of the treasury. After the Like My Intentions rod merged with the blood essence in his meridians, Howren suddenly had a trace of doubt in his heart and directly asked Thaling for confirmation. Howren, I suspect that Gao Wanping himself doesn't even know about the existence of the 5th floor of the treasury. Otherwise, he would have used the 9 4th rank and 3rd rank spirit stones to increase his cultivation. Therefore, I guess that the treasures on the 5th floor of the treasury are very likely to have been set up and left behind by the ancestors of the 100 Chi Gate. Thaling speculated. Thaling's speculation was similar to Howren's. Then, he looked at the 4th treasure. The 4th treasure was a pill bottle, a very beautiful pill bottle carved out of mysterious ice. Not to mention what kind of pills were in the pill bottle. Just the pill bottle itself was worth millions of 9th rank and 9th rank spirit stones. Mysterious ice came from the forbidden land of ice and snow in the northern part of the Tianxian continent. It was also where Yusiki had joined the headquarters of the Snow Palace. Mysterious ice was produced in glaciers 10,000 meters below the surface. It was an ice cube formed in an instant after being frozen by extreme cold. Mysterious ice could not be melted by fire or water. Its hardness was comparable to that of the 9 heavens' mysterious obsidian. Profound ice, due to its extreme cold temperature, could maintain an item for 10,000 years without any changes. Moreover, due to its low temperature, it could be used as a personal jade pendant to calm one's state of mind and eliminate inner demons. Seeing that the pill bottle was carved out of mysterious ice, Howren was immediately filled with anticipation for the pills in the pill bottle. However, due to his cautious nature in his previous life, he did not open the pill bottle rashly. Furthermore, considering the preciousness of the pill bottle, he was even more worried about the safety of the pills in the pill bottle. Therefore, he used a low-grade sword of the king's domain to put some distance between them and slowly opened the cork. When the cork of the bottle cracked a little, a faint black gas quickly floated out of the crack. Howren quickly closed the pill bottle. Just as the wisp of black gas left the pill bottle through the gap, Thaling's expression changed abruptly. At the same time, he mobilized all of his divine sense and used his divine sense manifestation to force the black gas back into the pill bottle. Howren, who was loudly reminding him, quickly closed the cork. As soon as the black gas appeared, Howren immediately felt a trace of destructive aura. Not only was he familiar with this aura, but he had also seen it in his previous life. Because the black gas was very strange, it could instantly turn a first-grade martial saint expert into a monster that did not recognize his own family and only knew how to kill. Therefore, without Thaling's reminder, Howren quickly used the low-grade sword of the king's domain to close the cork again. After the pill bottle was closed and no trace of the black gas was left, Howren anxiously jumped to the ground and sat down. Howren, you know about this black gas? Howren's nervous reaction and the fear on his face showed that he knew the origin of the black gas, which made Thaling even more nervous. As a victor who had existed for an unknown period of time, Although he had been seriously injured, and even his artifact spirit had been destroyed, he had been fortunate enough to receive the inheritance of the artifact spirit and happened to know some information about the black gas. And this black gas that emitted a destructive aura was the main culprit behind the destruction of the late ancient era. Yes, in my previous life, I once saw this black gas in a ruin, and I saw with my own eyes how it turned a first-grade martial saint expert into a monster that I had never seen before. Nodding his head, Howard told Thaling about the tragedy that he had witnessed in his previous life. And then, after hearing Howard's narration, the pagoda spirit's tone became extremely tense and solemn. The black gas turned a first-grade martial saint expert into a monster, and when the monster started its massacre, a blue lightning suddenly flashed across the sky. After the lightning passed, not only was the monster turned into dust, even the black gas was vaporized. As he narrated, Howard could clearly feel the horror of the black gas that had turned into a martial saint expert. Among the experts who had entered the ruins, there were 13 martial saints. Among them, there were even 2 peak third-grade martial saints. However, when faced with a first-grade martial saint who had turned into a monster, they were no match for the monster, even if they joined forces. If not for the fact that he was only a 7th-grade martial king at that time and was far away from the monster, he would have been killed in the first wave of the monster's attack. Phew! After hearing the ending of the black gas and the monster, Thaling couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Then, he ordered in a tone that didn't allow any objections. Howard, this pill bottle made from profound ice belongs to me. I will think of a way to further seal the black gas in the bottle. Of course, I will give you something of the same value as the profound ice. No need, you can keep the pill bottle, or you can just find a place and throw it away. You don't have to exchange anything with me. Hurriedly waving his hand, Howard indicated that he didn't have any thoughts about the pill bottle. All right, just do as I said. As for the conditions of the exchange, I will carefully consider it after returning to the Hidden Moon Pavilion. Not allowing Howard to object, Thaling forced the arrangement while keeping the pill bottle made from profound ice. After Thaling kept the pill bottle, Howard looked at the 5th treasure. The 5th treasure was also a pill bottle. However, this pill bottle could only be considered as a relatively precious jade bottle. Its value was only around 109th grade 9th stage spirit stones. It couldn't be compared to the pill bottle made from profound ice just now. In view of the fact that the pill bottle made from profound ice just now hid the black gas that could transform living beings, Howard was more careful and cautious this time. Thaling, who was also afraid of accidents, used his divine sense to check carefully in advance. Howard, just open it. There's only one pill inside. After confirming that there was only an ordinary pill in the pill bottle, Thaling reminded him. After receiving Thaling's reminder, Howard immediately felt relieved. Then, he reached out to pick up the pill bottle and poured out the pill inside. A 5th grade, first-grade barrier-breaking pill that has lost half of its medicinal effect. Chapter 158. Enforcer Peak, 5th floor of the Treasury. Barrier-breaking pill. Depending on the level of the pill refiner, different grades of barrier-breaking pills can be refined. Different grades of barrier-breaking pills targeted different realms, and they had different chances of providing assistance. For example, a 9th grade barrier-breaking pill can increase the chances of a peak 9th grade martial disciple breaking through to the martial warrior realm by 10%. A 9th grade barrier-breaking pill can increase the chances of a peak 9th grade martial disciple breaking through to the martial warrior realm by 90%. An 8th grade barrier-breaking pill can increase the chances of a peak 9th grade martial disciple breaking through to the martial master realm by 10%. An 8th grade barrier-breaking pill can increase the chances of a peak 9th grade martial disciple breaking through to the martial master realm by 90%, and so on and so forth. Originally, a 5th grade barrier-breaking pill can increase the chances of a peak 9th grade martial king breaking through to the martial king realm by 10%. But after losing half of its medicinal effect, The pill's effect can only reach between the 4th and 6th grade of the 6th grade. Although this barrier-breaking pill has lost half of its medicinal effect and is of no use to him, for Chu Zhongyu, who is about to break through to the martial king realm, it is undoubtedly icing on the cake. According to Feng Qingyun's original calculations, even with the soul grass enhancement to the soul, Chu Zhongyu will still need at least 3 to 6 months to break through to the martial king realm. With the help of this barrier-breaking pill, he can attempt to break through to the martial king realm within 10 days with a success rate of at least 90%. After putting the barrier-breaking pill back into the pill bottle and storing it in his storage ring, Yu Haoran's gaze turned to the 6th treasure. This is a strange beast pelt of unknown grade and species. There is no symbol on the pelt, so he can't tell what it is used for. Moreover, Thowling also used his divine sense to inspect the pelt several times, but he also didn't find anything strange about it. Helpless, Yu Haoran can only temporarily put it away and wait for an opportunity in the future to examine the secrets of the strange beast pelt. Finally, Yu Haoran's gaze turned to the last treasure, which is also the most precious treasure on the 5th floor of the treasury. It was a jade slip that emitted a faint green light. Due to the black gas in the pill bottle made of the 4th mysterious ice, Yu Haoran did not rashly read the contents of the jade slip. Instead, he let Thowling confirm whether the jade slip was safe or not. In fact, even without Yu Haoran's reminder, Thowling would have used his divine telekinesis to check ahead of time. He was also worried that the black gas would appear again. However, when his divine sense came into contact with the jade slip, he was startled by the green light emitted by the jade slip. He quickly withdrew his divine sense and pondered for a while. Then he asked solemnly, "Yu Haoran, this is an inheritance jade slip. The jade slip contains the inheritance left behind by an expert of unknown cultivation level. In other words, you have 2 choices now. The first option is for me to use my divine sense to check if the jade slip is safe. The result is that the inheritance in the jade slip is lost forever. Because I am an artifact spirit, it is impossible for me to accept the inheritance of any living being. The second option is to take a risk and see if the inheritance in the jade slip is good or bad, whether it 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 is good or bad. All of this depends on your choice. A multiple choice question. The 2 options given by Thowling did not give Yu Haoran too much time to consider. He directly reached out to pick up the jade slip and touched it with his divine sense. Then, the jade slip turned into a ray of green light and entered his sea of consciousness. Then he bent his knees and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and began to accept the inheritance in the jade slip. After nearly a quarter of an hour, Yu Haoran slowly opened his eyes. His expression was very calm. It was impossible to tell whether the inheritance in the jade slip was good or bad. "Yu Haoran, how is it?" Thowling asked expectantly. This method should only exist in heaven. It is rare to see it in the human world. Yu Haoran could not help but sigh. Then, he got up and left the 5th floor through the crack in the treasure vault. After accepting the inheritance in the jade slip, Yu Haoran finally knew the true history of the 5th floor of the treasure vault. Furthermore, the 5th floor of the treasure vault had existed for a long time, far longer than anyone could imagine. "Yu Haoran, what kind of cultivation method is this?" After sighing, he left the 5th floor of the treasure vault without revealing any information about the cultivation method. Thowling, who was eager to know the contents of the jade slip, could not bear it. "Thowling, the cultivation method in the jade slip is related to a secret of heaven and earth. It is not easy for you to know about it in your current state. When you have more or less recovered and are able to use the strength of a martial honor, I will definitely tell you," Yu Haoran replied instinctively. However, when he finished saying those words, an incomparably comfortable feeling welled up in his heart. This comfortable feeling not only allowed his mental state to be closer to that of a martial sage, but also allowed his damaged dantian to show signs of recovery. Yu Haoran did feel comfortable when he said those words. However, to Thowling, It was as if he had choked on something. He felt like vomiting, but was unable to do so. This was because he had often said those words to Yu Haoran in the past. However, he had never imagined that these words would one day be used on him. Faling did not know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, he deeply understood the pain of wanting to know but being unable to do so. After leaving the crack in the treasure vault's 5th floor, the crack closed automatically and the round ball fell down. Yu Haoran placed the round ball back in its original position and left the treasure vault. After he left the treasure vault, he discovered that Chu Zhongyu and Lin Wei were chatting with each other. Furthermore, based on the way the two of them were chatting, the content of their conversation seemed to be very harmonious. Ninth junior brother, you've finished choosing your treasures. Seeing that Yu Haoran had walked out of the treasure vault, Chu Zhongyu took the initiative to end his conversation with Lin Wei and then called out to Yu Haoran. Deputy Peak Master Lin, I've finished choosing my treasures. I'll take my leave first. Yu Haoran walked directly to Chu Zhongyu's side and gave him a meaningful look as he bid farewell to Lin Wei. Although he wanted to rope Lin Wei into Qingyun Peak, his actions in the Enforcer Peak's treasure vault had been a little excessive. Hence, now was not the best time to rope him in. Furthermore, he was afraid that Lin Wei would find trouble with him after seeing the empty treasure vault. Yu Haoran only wanted to leave as soon as possible. Lin Wei nodded. Not only did he not ask Yu Haoran what treasures he had taken, he even revealed a gratified expression on his face. This was because when Yu Haoran left the treasure vault, his hands were not holding any treasures. Chapter 159. Above the Law Enforcement Peak. After leaving the Law Enforcement Peak with Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu asked in confusion, Ninth junior brother, why are you in such a hurry to leave? After all, through the chat earlier, he noticed that after the unexpected event yesterday, Lin Wei had already intended to leave the Law Enforcement Peak and retire at the Beastmaster Peak. As the eldest senior brother of Qingyun Peak, Chu Zhongyu's understanding of Lin Wei was no less than Yu Haoran's. He knew that if Qingyun Peak could obtain Lin Wei, not only would it not destroy the unity of Qingyun Peak, but it would also raise Qingyun Peak's status in the sect. Therefore, he tried his best to talk to Lin Wei in the hope that he could get Lin Wei to join Qingyun Peak. Eldest senior brother, if someone emptied the treasury of Qingyun Peak, would you be angry? Yu Haoran asked. Of course, not only would I be angry, but I would also find trouble with the person who emptied the treasury. Speaking of this, Chu Zhongyu could not help but turn to look at Yu Haoran with a hint of horror in his eyes. That's right. When I captured Ishuda yesterday, I accidentally obtained a storage device from him. Although the storage device's space is not very big, it is not a problem to take away more than half of the treasures in the Law Enforcement Peak's treasury. Yu Haoran did not hide anything and directly explained to Chu Zhongyu what he had obtained yesterday and what he had done just now. After hearing Yu Haoran's explanation, Chu Zhongyu's first reaction was to use all his soul and Yuan Qi to speed up to Qingyun Peak. But just as Chu Zhongyu started to speed up, Lin Wei's angry roar came from the treasury of Law Enforcement Peak behind him. Yu Haoran, you've gone too far. Ninth junior brother Yu. Hearing Lin Wei's angry roar, Chu Zhongyu could not help but smile bitterly and shake his head. Then he continued to speed up to Qingyun Peak. Qingyun Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Eldest senior brother, gather all the other senior brothers. I'm going to have a loot sharing meeting. After landing in the courtyard of Hidden Moon Pavilion, Yu Haoran stopped Chu Zhongyu from persuading him to return the treasures. Then he asked him to gather all the people of Qingyun Peak. After distributing the treasures from the Law Enforcement Peak's treasury, Yu's actions, Chu Zhongyu immediately gave up the idea of persuading him to return some of the treasures. Then he used his soul and began to notify all the people of Qingyun Peak. Brother, Chu Zhongyu his soul and Yuan sect senior brother said Chu Zhongyu sect. After Chu Zhongyu's Chu's fifth senior brother was Huang, was the fifth brother senior brother. Before he even entered the door, he had already started making a ruckus. Zhongyu Chu's looking Peak junior brother Chu's to his young senior disciples junior Chu's. Understood. Huang Zonghua waved his hand and ignored Chu Zhongyu Haoran's criticism. He directly rushed to Yu Haoran and asked with a smile, "Ninth junior brother, why did you call me here? Stand aside obediently and don't talk too much." Seeing Huang Zonghua ignore his criticism, Chu Zhongyu appeared beside him in a flash and used his left hand to hold him down. Then he pulled Huang Zonghua to his side and ordered him sternly. Huang Zonghua stuck his tongue out at Yu Haoran and chose to keep quiet for the time being. Looking at Huang Zonghua, Yu Haoran couldn't help but shake his head. He also couldn't do anything about his fifth senior brother's temperament. Fortunately, the senior brothers who came later, as well as Wu Jingjun, weren't the kind of people who talked too much. Since the senior brothers and Zhengjun are already here, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense. Let's start the distribution of the treasures. After everyone from Qingyun's faction had arrived, Yu Haoran didn't stand up. Instead, he communicated with the storage ear and Victor with his mind and began to distribute the treasures obtained from the Peak Manager's treasure vault. Eldest senior brother, this is a level 5 first-grade bottleneck-breaking pill. Because it has been stored for too long, more than half of its medicinal efficacy has been lost. Now, it can only display the effects of a level 6 4th grade or level 6 grade pill. It's just right for you to break through to the Martial King realm. Gesturing for Chu Zhongyu to sit opposite of the stone table, Yu Haoran took out the bottleneck-breaking pill he had obtained from the 5th floor of the treasure vault. As he explained, he placed the pill bottle in front of Chu Zhongyu. This is a bottleneck-breaking pill that can increase the chances of breaking through to the next realm. Looking at the pill bottle in front of him, Chu Zhongyu, who had been full of anticipation, couldn't help but ask excitedly, "That's right." Yu Haoran nodded and continued. "According to what I heard from Master, the main reason why you were able to wake up so quickly was because of a stalk of soul grass that hadn't fully matured yet. Soul grass is a top spiritual grass that can help a Martial King break through to the Martial King realm. Although the soul grass wasn't fully matured when eldest senior brother took it, it still retained at least 40 to 50% of its medicinal efficacy. Now, with the help of both the soul grass and the bottleneck-breaking pill, eldest senior brother's breakthrough to the Martial King realm is just around the corner." Listening to Yu Haoran's detailed analysis of eldest senior brother's current state, the Qingyun disciples present all revealed happy and excited expressions. If Chu Zhongyu could really break through to the Martial King realm in a short period of time, with the help of Yu Haoran's ability to transform into a Martial Emperor realm exotic beast, the Qingyun faction status in the sect would probably rise to the top. At that time, whether it was their status or cultivation resources, there would definitely be a very significant increase. Ninth junior brother, this bottleneck-breaking pill determines whether or not I can break through to the Martial King realm, so I won't be polite with you," Chu Zhongyu said in a trembling voice as he picked up the pill bottle containing the bottleneck-breaking pill. Seeing how excited Chu Zhongyu was, Yu Haoran couldn't help but tease him. "Eldest senior brother, a mere bottleneck-breaking pill is enough to make you so excited. Are you going to faint if you know the value of the next treasure?" Then, he communicated with Thaling with his consciousness and asked, "Thaling, has Gao Wanping's mark been removed from the Heaven Shield Bowl, a top-grade Emperor realm magic weapon?" "It's been removed a long time ago," Thaling replied as he tossed the bowl to Yu Haoran. Thaling didn't have any objections to Yu Haoran giving the Heaven Shield Bowl to Chu Zhongyu. This was because ever since Yu Haoran's cultivation broke through to the martial warrior realm, and he began to consciously temper his body, Thaling had a plan to let Yu Haoran keep tempering his body and keep the grade of his body in sync with his cultivation. As long as the grade of his body was kept in sync with his cultivation, there was no need for a defensive magic weapon at all. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't need one. What he really needed was a top-grade Venerable Realm magic weapon, a top-grade Emperor Realm magic weapon, or even a top-grade Deity Realm magic weapon. Eldest senior brother, this top-grade Emperor Realm magic weapon is called the Heaven Shield Bowl. It's an extremely powerful defensive magic weapon. As for its origin, I'm sure you know about it. Yu Haoran took out the Heaven Shield Bowl from Victor with his consciousness and placed it in front of him. Chapter 160. Qingyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Not only did Chu Zhongyu refuse Yu Haoran's gift, the heaven-covering bowl, a top-grade Emperor stage magic weapon, he shook his head and refused. Ninth junior brother. This is a top-grade Emperor stage magic weapon. Not to mention our Qingyan Peak, even the 100 Qi Gate probably only has one top-grade Emperor stage magic weapon. Junior brother, you're a decisive person who hates evil. In the future, you'll definitely encounter more danger than me, so you should use this top-grade Emperor stage magic weapon. Yu Haoran forcefully shoved the heaven-covering bowl into Chu Zhongyu's hands and expressed his attitude with a very disdainful tone. Eldest senior brother, what kind of person am I, Yu Haoran? I'm a monstrous genius who can become a venerable or emperor in the future. A mere damaged Emperor stage magic weapon is nothing in my eyes. My future magic weapon will at least be a top-grade venerable stage magic weapon. Eldest senior brother, don't you know ninth junior brother's personality? He'll never take back what he wants to give away. Huang Zonghua couldn't help but persuade Chu Zhongyu when he saw that he was about to refuse again. He was eager to know what he would get. Eldest senior brother, fifth junior brother, is right. From the fact that he angrily challenged the Hall of Merit's Hall Master and attacked Enforcer Peak, it's clear that ninth junior brother is a man of his words. So don't refuse anymore. Lu Guangwei agreed. He didn't agree because he was looking forward to the treasure he would get. He just didn't want Chu Zhongyu to refuse too much and affect the attitude of the other junior brothers when they receive the treasure later. All right, Lu Guangwei and Huang Zonghua's persuasion made Chu Zhongyu finally accept the heaven-covering bowl helplessly. Chu Zhongyu raised his head and glanced at Yu Haoran. He wanted to use his life to thank Yu Haoran, but when he remembered that he had already used his life to make an oath when he attacked Enforcer Peak yesterday, he could only choose to keep his mouth shut for now. However, the gratitude and trust he had for Yu Haoran in his heart had already surpassed that of his master, Feng Qingyan. Eldest senior brother, here are 1,000 7th grade to 9th grade spirit stones. It's enough for you to consolidate your cultivation as a first-grade martial king and continue to rapidly increase your cultivation. Although Chu Zhongyu didn't say any words of gratitude, Yu Haoran could tell how he was feeling from his fluctuating emotions. By helping Chu Zhongyu like this, other than repaying the favor he had done to his eldest senior brother in his previous life, Yu Haoran also wanted to gain his friendship. To put it bluntly, she wanted to gain his unconditional trust. Because according to Thalink's words, after his rebirth, his future path of martial arts would be filled with bloodshed, and he might even become the enemy of everyone in the world. Therefore, he needed helpers, friends, and subordinates who had absolute trust in him and would not betray him easily. Second senior brother, due to your personality and interests, I don't have many treasures that suit you. After putting away his complicated thoughts, Yu Haoran looked at second senior brother Lu Guangwei and said apologetically, "It's fine. I'm not too interested in cultivation anyway." Lu Guangwei waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "Second senior brother, but I promise you, in a year's time or 2 years' time, I'll give you a succession that will satisfy you, one that will allow you to achieve the martial sacred realm, or even the martial highness realm." Although Lu Guangwei indicated that he didn't mind, Yu Haoran didn't want to treat him differently. Therefore, he promised Lu Guangwei that he would compensate him in the future and took out 2 boxes of spirit stones from the victor. Second senior brother, although you're not interested in cultivation, we live in a world where the strong are respected. Strength is the only guarantee for survival. Therefore, use these 2,000 7th grade spirit stones to increase your strength. It will be easier for you to receive the inheritance in the future. Okay. Lu Guangwei accepted the 2 boxes of spirit stones without any formalities and retreated to the side of the pavilion. As for the inheritance that Yu Haoran mentioned just now, he only took it as Yu Haoran's consolation and didn't take it to heart. Third senior brother, you are now at the early 7th level of the martial arts grandmaster realm. Your foundation is quite solid and your mental state is quite outstanding. Therefore, this soul-hooking sword, a top-grade King's Realm celestial device, will be your natal celestial device for the time being. Before Dong Mingyu could refuse, Yu Haoran also took out 2 boxes of spirit stones and continued. Just like second senior brother, here are 2007th grade spirit stones. They should be able to help you reach the peak of the 9th grade martial grandmaster. At that time, it will depend on your personal situation. If you break through to the martial king realm with your own comprehension, then I will find a way to help you change to an emperor stage instrument. If the bottleneck of the martial king realm is too solid, then I will help you find pills that can help you break through. 9th junior brother, thank you. Dong Mingyu, who is not good with words, silently accepted the instruments and spirit stones. At this moment, he was thinking the same thing as Chu Zhongyu. The future depended on his actions. 4th senior brother, your cultivation is now at the early 3rd grade martial grandmaster. The strength of your soul is not as strong as 3rd senior brother's, so you can only use a low-grade King Realm instrument for the time being. Yu Haoran explained as he took out a low-grade King Realm sword. In addition to the low-grade King Realm instrument, this bottle of azure coagulation pills can be used to temper the soul. When the power of your divine soul is completely consolidated and completely integrated with your cultivation, I will give you a top-grade King's Realm celestial device as your natal celestial device. At the same time, here are 2007th grade spirit stones. They should be able to help you reach the peak of a 9th grade martial grandmaster. Like 3rd senior brother, how you break through to the martial king realm in the future depends on your own situation. 9th junior brother, I won't say any more words of gratitude and loyalty. In the future, everything depends on your actions. Although the level of the celestial instrument was not as high as Dong Mingyu's, the number of spirit stones and the extra pills were enough to show that the treasures Yu Haoran gave to them were targeted according to their own situations. Therefore, Cheng Yin was not dissatisfied at all. Instead, he was just as grateful as the other 3 senior brothers. 5th senior brother, your situation is a little special, so you don't get a share of the treasures this time. Yu Haoran said seriously when he saw Huang Zonghua rush directly to the stone table. What? I don't get a share? Huang Guohua, who had been looking forward to it, asked in surprise. Yu Haoran nodded and said with a serious expression, that's right. After getting Yu Haoran's confirmation, Huang Zonghua pressed his left hand on his heart and looked heartbroken. 9th junior brother, my heart is broken. 5th senior brother, I have a bottle of top pills here that can heal the 5 viscera and 6 bowels. Why don't you take this bottle of pills as a gift? Yu Haoran asked, pretending to be a kind person. 9th junior brother, a broken heart is a serious injury. Not only will it affect my newly consolidated cultivation, but it will also delay my future cultivation. How are you going to compensate me? Chapter 161. Qingyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. How about this? Seeing that Huang Zonghua was still asking for compensation, Yu Haoran cooperatively took out some elixirs from his storage ear and asked with concern. 5th senior brother, I have a bottle of condensing chi pills at the 8th and 9th level, constitution-enhancing pills at the 1st level of the 7th level, tranquil pills at the 3rd level of the 7th level, and chi refining pills and energy-restoring pills at the 6th level of the 7th level. I wonder if these elixirs can heal your injuries. Huang Zonghua quickly put away the elixir bottles on the stone table and complained, they can barely heal my injuries, but what about my future cultivation? Alas, seeing that Huang Zonghua was still not satisfied with the compensation just now, Yu Haoran could only sigh. Then he took out 3 boxes of spirit stones from the victor and asked with reluctance. 5th senior brother, here are 3,000 spirit stones at the 1st and 9th level of the 7th level. I wonder if they can satisfy your future cultivation? More or less. Seeing the 3 boxes of spirit stones on the stone table, Huang Zonghua quickly picked them up. But he didn't have a storage celestial device, so he put them on one side of the pavilion for the time being. Then he walked up to Yu Haoran, waved his hand, and said in a tough tone, I still need a King's Domain celestial device. Shaking his head with a smile, Yu Haoran directly took out a pair of boxing gloves which had reached the upper grade of the king's realm. He handed it to Huang Zonghua and reminded him, "Fifth senior brother, this pair of boxing gloves at the superior king's domain celestial device can increase your real strength by 20 to 30%, but it's not suitable to be your natal celestial device. I already have an idea for your natal celestial device. I'll find someone to refine it for you in the future." "Okay, I'll ask you for it then." Huang Zonghua took the boxing gloves at the superior king's domain celestial device without hesitation and retreated to the edge of the pavilion with a smile on his face. "Fifth junior brother, ninth junior brother, what were you doing just now?" Dong Mingyu, the third senior brother, asked in confusion. As for the other few people, they also revealed a very puzzled expression. Only the eldest senior brother Chu Zhongyu seemed to have guessed the reason why Yu Haoran and Huang Zonghua had extorted and been extorted just now. Seeing Huang Zonghua's grinning face and Yu Haoran's nonchalant attitude, Chu Zhongyu finally confirmed his conjecture. He felt heartfelt admiration and gratitude towards these two junior brothers of his who were so considerate. However, seeing that Yu Haoran and Huang Zonghua had no intention of explaining, he could only take the initiative to explain. "Can't you see it? Ninth junior brother and fifth junior brother were just joking just now to lighten the atmosphere." Looking up at Chu Zhongyu, Yu Haoran's eyes lit up, because he didn't expect that the first person to see through his act with Huang Zonghua was him. That's right, the extortion and counter-extortion between him and Huang Zonghua just now was indeed just a show. The purpose was to ease the overly heavy atmosphere at the scene. This was because he realized that although he had kindly given the spirit stones, elixirs, and magic weapons to his senior brothers, which made them feel very touched, it also created an invisible heavy burden in their hearts. The intention of giving the treasures was to win over his senior brothers and strengthen their trust in him, so that when he fought for the peak of martial arts in the future, he could have a group of trustworthy friends by his side. But he didn't want his senior brothers to choose to help him out of guilt. Fortunately, the astute Huang Zonghua also noticed this problem, and under his inadvertent signal, he cooperated perfectly. Although Yu Haoran didn't say it clearly, the senior brothers at the scene weren't fools. After thinking for a while, they knew the reason why Huang Zonghua and Yu Haoran were acting. So, they looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, the pressure that was pressing down on their hearts instantly disappeared without a trace. "Ninth junior brother, my situation is exactly the same as fifth senior brother's, so you should know what to do with the treasures that should be given to me." After knowing Yu Haoran's intention, Pan Yuhai, who was not as lively as Huang Zonghua, sat directly opposite Yu Haoran and stretched out his hand to ask for the same thing as Huang Zonghua. "Sixth senior brother, I've already prepared it for you." Taking out some elixirs and 3 boxes of 7th level spirit stones, Yu Haoran said with a smile. Chapter 162. Qingyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Yu Haoran noticed a problem when he saw his 6 senior brothers guarding the spirit stones with smiles on their faces. The resources that Qingyan Peak lacked the most weren't spirit stones or pills. What they really needed were artifacts that could be used for storage. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought the spirit stones and pills with them when they went out to train. Moreover, some of the treasures that they found during their training were inconvenient to carry around. However, storage-type magic tools were more precious than Emperor-level magic tools. It was difficult to obtain 1, let alone 9. However, Yu Haoran knew that there was a force that had a lot of storage-type artifacts. However, with his current strength, he couldn't do anything to that force for the time being. Therefore, he planned to wait until he reached the peak of 9th grade Martial Grandmaster or broke through to the Martial King realm before he took his senior brothers to that faction, and see if he could fight for a few storage artifacts. 7th senior brother, you're only an early 8th grade Martial Master, let alone a King realm magic weapon. Even a low-grade Zone realm magic weapon would be useless. After his senior brothers helped Xiao Nan move the spirit stones, Yu Haoran explained to him about the artifacts. "That's why I won't give you any artifacts for now." "No need. I don't want any artifact for now. Xiaonan stroked the box full of spirit stones while sniffing the pill fragrance in the pill bottle. He couldn't even move his hands to express his attitude. 8th senior brother. Yu Haoran greeted Lin Xian, who walked to the stone table without saying a word. He then lowered his head and considered for a moment. Unlike Chu Zhongyu, Lin Xian was a little different. Whether it was his cultivation talent and potential, the speed of his cultivation, or his decisiveness in dealing with matters, there weren't many treasures that were suitable for Lin Xian from the Enforcement Peak. It seemed that only spirit stones that could assist in cultivation were suitable for his current needs. However, considering the spirit stones, pills, and artifacts that his 7 senior brothers had distributed, Yu Haoran didn't want to be treated differently. Therefore, he could only seek help from the Thaling and the Victor. After hearing Yu Haoran's question and learning more about Lin Xian's situation, Thaling pondered for a moment before giving some suggestions. After hearing Thaling's suggestion, Yu Haoran's confusion instantly disappeared. 8th senior brother, your talent, potential, perception, perseverance, temperament, and so on are far superior to eldest senior brother and the others. Therefore, ordinary cultivation resources are not of much use to you. Therefore, I have allocated 3 types of resources to you, Yu Haoran said as he took out 20 boxes of spirit stones from a victor. The first option is the same as 7 senior brothers. I'll give you as many spirit stones as you need from the 1st to the 9th grade of the 8th grade and the 1st to the 9th grade of the 7th grade. 9th junior brother, thank you. Due to his talent and potential, as well as the speed of his cultivation, Lin Xian's consumption of spirit stones was very high. He had always been in a situation where he couldn't make ends meet. Therefore, he didn't refuse the large amount of spirit stones that Yu Haoran gave him. The second option is the same as me. 8th senior brother, you also have the strength to challenge those of a higher level. Moreover, you're now a 9th grade martial master. It won't take long for you to break through to the martial grandmaster realm. Therefore, a suitable weapon is essential. Yu Haoran took out 3 sword-shaped magic weapons and placed them on the stone table before explaining them one by one. One is a low-grade zone realm magic weapon, one is a low-grade king realm magic weapon, and one is a high-grade king realm magic weapon. 8th senior brother, you can use different magic weapons at different stages according to your cultivation and strength. However, these magic weapons are not suitable to be your natal magic weapon. Therefore, you still need to find or refine your own natal magic weapon according to your own conditions. Seeing Yu Haoran take out 3 magic weapons of different grades in one breath, even Chu Zhongyu and the others, who had already obtained enough, couldn't help but gasp. They were shocked, not because Yu Haoran gave Lin Xian so many magic weapons, but because they truly felt the huge gap between Qingyun Peak and Law Enforcement Peak. This made these people, who had always thought of not competing in the world, for the first time feel competitive in their hearts. The third resource is a set of martial arts techniques without a grade. If this set of martial arts techniques can be promoted to the peak of the completion realm, 8th senior brother can use it to comprehend a special kind of power of law and advance to the martial sage realm. After cultivating to the peak of the completion realm, one could comprehend the power of law and break through to the martial sage realm. After hearing Yu Haoran's introduction, Lin Xian, whose state of mind hadn't changed much, couldn't help but tremble. Then, he picked up the jade slip that Yu Haoran gave him. After reading it with his mind, he immersed himself in understanding and comprehending the martial arts techniques. Thaling, is this set of martial arts techniques really that magical? The martial arts technique that Thaling gave Lin Xian was actually given by him as a condition to exchange for the mysterious ice elixir bottle. In his previous life, Yu Haoran had come into contact with many martial arts techniques, and he had even collected a few heaven-level martial arts techniques. However, he had rarely seen martial arts techniques that could be cultivated to the completion realm and allowed one to comprehend the power of law. Therefore, he was a little skeptical of Thaling's words just now. Yu Haoran, to tell you the truth, among all the graded martial arts techniques in the Tianxian continent, Nearly 90% of them can ultimately comprehend the power of law. However, to comprehend the power of law through martial arts techniques. First, it depends on your understanding of martial arts techniques. Second, it depends on whether the martial arts techniques are compatible with your body. At this point, Thowling looked at Yu Haoran and continued to explain. Yu Haoran, take the two martial arts techniques that you are currently cultivating as an example. Light Wind Palm. If you can break through to the completion realm, you can comprehend a very special power of law. However, even if you break through to the completion realm, you will not be able to comprehend this special power of law. This is because your body is not suitable for comprehending this special power of law. Frenzied Bull Fist. If you can break through to the completion realm, you will be able to comprehend the power of law. This is because your body is suitable for the power of law. Therefore, you can use the Frenzied Bull Fist to comprehend the power of law and break through to the martial saint realm. The Frenzied Bull Fist can also comprehend the power of law. Thowling's explanation made Yu Haoran pleasantly surprised. However, he could not help but feel a trace of regret in his heart. In his previous life, under the supervision of his master, the Frenzied Bull Fist advanced very quickly. In just a little over a year, it had reached the completion realm. However, he felt that the Frenzied Bull Fist level was too low and its power was too weak. Therefore, after reaching the completion realm, he did not continue to cultivate it. If he had continued to cultivate it, it was very likely that he could comprehend the power of law through the Frenzied Bull Fist and break through to the martial saint realm. Then, there would be no need to take the risk of entering the demon god's ancient tomb. However, thinking about it the other way around, if it was not for the fact that he could not comprehend the power of law, he would not have taken the risk to enter the demon god's ancient tomb. If he did not take the risk to enter the demon god's ancient tomb, he would not have encountered the tomb's explosion. If he did not encounter the demon god's ancient tomb's explosion, he would not have met Victor and Thowling. Moreover, he would not have retained all his memories and returned to 100 years ago. Chapter 163. Clear Cloud Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Thank you, Ninth Junior Brother. Through reading and understanding the cultivation method in the Jade Slip, Lin Xian felt that this cultivation method was simply tailor-made for him. Moreover, through comprehending the martial skill cultivation method in the Jade Slip, he faintly felt that the blood in his veins actually had a kind of boiling and burning feeling. The boiling and burning sensation made him feel like he was on the verge of a breakthrough. How could Lin Xian not understand that the cultivation method Yu Haoran had given him was countless times more precious than a top-grade Emperor artifact? 8th Senior Brother, if you feel that something is wrong or you don't understand anything during your cultivation, you can come to me. I should be able to resolve your doubts. Yu Haoran said enviously when he saw Lin Xian's excited expression and could vaguely feel the blood in his veins boiling. Apart from helping Lin Xian comprehend the power of laws, the most important effect of the cultivation method he had just given him was that it could continuously stimulate the blood in his veins and stimulate the special constitution in his blood. This was why Thowling had specially chosen the most suitable cultivation method for Lin Xian from his personal collection after hearing Lin Xian's detailed description of Lin Xian's situation. Lin Xian nodded and crushed the Jade Slip to put away the 3 artifacts. Then, he moved the 20 chests of spirit stones on the left side of the stone table. 1st Senior Brother, let's end the treasure distribution for today. I know that you're all eager to go back and use these resources to cultivate, so I won't keep you any longer. After Lin Xian moved away the 20 chests of spirit stones, Yu Haoran unexpectedly didn't give Wu Xingjun any treasure, not even a single spirit stone. Although this was unexpected, no one asked about it, not even the talkative Huang Zonghua. This was because they knew that Yu Haoran would never treat Wu Xingjun unfairly. Wu Zhengjun's expression was just as calm, as if he didn't care whether Yu Haoran would give him a share of the treasures. As expected, Yu Haoran spoke to Wu Xingjun after Chu Zhongyu and the others used origin energy to wrap up the cultivation resources and left the Hidden Moon Pavilion. Zhengjun, follow me to the cultivation room. Without asking any questions, Wu Zhengjun followed Yu Haoran into the room. They sat down cross-legged and Yu Haoran asked, Zhengjun, do you feel uncomfortable that you didn't get any spirit stones, pills, or artifact from the distribution this time? Shaking his head, Wu Zhengjun said solemnly, the secret art of devouring is extremely beneficial to me. I'm not interested in other things. Yu Haoran nodded. He knew that the words he had just said were from the bottom of his heart. However, it wasn't because he didn't prepare the treasures he had prepared. It wasn't suitable for him to take them out in the hall. Zhengjun, as I said to 7th senior brother, I can give you as many spirit stones, pills, artifacts as you want, but Yu Haoran said as he took out 2 yellow apricot-sized drops of blood essence from the realm spirit. Spirit stones, pills, and artifacts aren't what you need right now. What you need to do now is continue to improve your physical body grade and continue to activate the Bloodthirsty's special constitution. Zhengjun, do you remember when I told you that I would give you a chance to be reborn when you enter the mountain range? Shaking his head, Wu Zhengjun indicated that he had already forgotten. Sigh, Zhengjun, in the future, can you take what I say to heart? Seeing that Wu Zhengjun had already forgotten what he had told him, Yu Haoran couldn't help but feel a little depressed. However, thinking that the Bloodthirsty's physique was getting more and more affected, Wu Zhengjun was only focused on cultivation. It was normal for him to forget about the chance he had casually mentioned. Therefore, the depression in his heart dissipated. Then, he handed one of the drops of blood essence, which exuded a sinister aura, to Wu Zhengjun. Some time ago, I went deep into the mountain range to train alone. I happened to encounter 2 level 8, level 9 exotic beasts. They were fighting over a precious level 8, level 1 spiritual herb. In the end, the 2 exotic beasts perished together. These 2 exotic beasts weren't ordinary exotic beasts. One was a heaven-drawing elephant with the bloodline of the ancient divine elephant, and the other was a sky-devouring snake with the bloodline of the ancient divine dragon. Zhengjun, this drop of blood essence is the blood essence of a level 8, level 9 exotic beast, sky-devouring snake. The energy contained in the blood essence can not only improve your physical body grade, but also activate your Bloodthirsty's physique. It can help you better activate your special constitution. After explaining the origin and effects of the blood essence in detail, Yu Haoran motioned for Wu Zhengjun to accept the blood essence. Yu Shixiao, as he accepted the blood essence of the sky-devouring snake, Wu Zhengjun's originally cold face revealed a gentle expression. Although Wu Zhengjun also desired the improvement of his cultivation and strength, what he really cared about was the continuous activation of his Bloodthirsty's physique. This was because the more the Bloodthirsty's physique was activated, the deeper his understanding of it would become. He knew that the activation of the Bloodthirsty's physique would affect the improvement of his cultivation and strength. The faster the Bloodthirsty's physique was activated, the faster his cultivation and strength would increase. Therefore, compared to the indifference of the spiritual stones, elixirs, and dharma artifacts, the sky-devouring snake's blood essence that could help activate the Bloodthirsty's physique made him excited. Zhengjun, you also know that I used the secret transformation technique yesterday, which caused my body to suffer the backlash of the technique. Based on our relationship, there are some things that I won't hide from you. The reason why he gave the sky-devouring snake's blood essence to Wu Zhengjun at this time was because Yu Haoran was unwilling to give up the opportunity in the Blue Moon's secret realm, as well as the opportunity for revenge. Since he couldn't recover his Dantian's injury in a short period of time, he needed a helper if he wanted to achieve his goal. At the same time, Wu Zhengjun, who had the Bloodthirsty's physique and came from the same city, was his strongest and most trustworthy helper when he conquered the world in the future. Therefore, he needed Wu Zhengjun to help him seize the opportunity and kill the enemy of his previous life. He also hoped to use the experience in the Blue Moon secret realm to train Wu Zhengjun in advance. After hearing about Yu Haoran's real situation, Wu Zhengjun couldn't help but ask worriedly, Yu Shixiao, how can you recover your Dantian's injury? This was because he didn't expect that Yu Haoran who seemed to have a normal aura, would have such a big hidden danger in his body? You don't have to worry about my injury. This time in the Blue Moon's secret realm, there will be a spiritual medicine that can heal Dantian injuries. You Shixiang, don't worry. Even if I have to risk my life, I will help you obtain that spiritual medicine. Wu Zhengjun swore with his fists tightly clenched. No need. Yu Haoran shook his head and said, you only need to use the sky-devouring snake's blood essence to raise your physical body's grade to the peak of 9th grade in a short 2 days. Then, activate the bloodthirsty's physique to the 7th grade. Then, you will have the strength of a peak 1st grade martial master. At that time, you just need to help me do a few things. Chapter 164. Hidden Moon Pavilion, Practice Room. Before Wu Zhengjun swallowed the blood essence of sky-devouring snake, Yu Haoran still needed to ensure that the process of refining the blood essence was safe. Therefore, Yu Haoran asked Thaling in his sea of consciousness, Thaling, is there anything I need to pay attention to during the process of swallowing the blood essence of sky-devouring snake? It all depends on the strength of the physical body, as well as one's own willpower and perseverance. Thaling replied. After hearing Thaling's answer, Yu Haoran temporarily put away the blood essence of Heavenly Elephant and then watched Wu Zhengjun to observe some of his reactions after swallowing the blood essence of sky-devouring snake. If everything went well, then he would consume the blood essence of Heavenly Elephant and try to see if he could break through to the perfect level 10 physical body. If things didn't go well, then he would be able to help in time. After Wu Zhengjun consumed the blood essence of sky-devouring snake, in less than a second, his whole body was shrouded in a red light that exuded a strong smell of blood. In this regard, Yu Haoran couldn't help but nod, because he knew that the energy of sky-devouring snake's blood essence was stimulating the bloodthirsty physique, further activating Wu Zhengjun's bloodthirsty physique. After 10 seconds, with the continuous eruption of sky-devouring snake's blood essence, the blood mist that shrouded Wu Zhengjun's body had turned into a blood cocoon. It was impossible to see his current situation with the naked eye. Fortunately, with the strength of Thaling's divine mind, he could observe Wu Zhengjun's changes anytime, anywhere. After a minute, Wu Zhengjun, who was in the blood chrysalis, did not scream in pain, nor did he have the aura that was formed when his physical body broke through. This made Yu Haoran nervous. Yu Haoran, don't be nervous. The power of sky-devouring snake's blood essence has only reached the 7th level. With the quality of Wu Zhengjun's physical body, he can still withstand the impact of the 7th level. Seeing the nervous Yu Haoran, Thaling, who had been paying attention to Wu Zhengjun's situation in the blood cocoon, comforted him. Thaling's comforting words made Yu Haoran's nerves relax a little. But at this moment, a roar like that of a dragon suddenly came from the blood cocoon, which made his originally relaxed nerves tense again. Thaling, what happened? A dragon-like roar suddenly sounded from the blood cocoon, causing Yu Haoran to involuntarily stand up and ask with a grave expression. The greatest danger in the process of refining the sky-devouring snake's blood essence is not the huge amount of energy contained in the blood essence, but the remnant soul that has inherited the bloodline of the ancient divine beast. That roar just now was actually a trace of the ancient dragon's soul's blood. If that kid can withstand the impact of the soul's remnant, then not only can he perfectly refine sky-devouring snake's blood essence, but his physical body's grade will also directly rise to the peak of the 9th level. More importantly, his bloodthirsty physique will directly open to the 7th level, and he will truly have the strength of a martial master. Thaling explained in detail, indicating to Yu Haoran not to worry. Thaling, with Zhengjun's willpower and perseverance, can he withstand the impact of the dragon's remnant soul? The pagoda genie's explanation did not put Yu Haoran at ease. He directly asked the crux of the issue. I don't know either. Thaling shook his head in the sea of consciousness, indicating that he also did not know whether Wu Zhengjun's willpower and perseverance could withstand the impact of the dragon's remnant soul. But just as he finished shaking his head, he was suddenly shocked by the change in the blood cocoon. Then, he could not help but praise. Good kid, your reaction is even faster. You can actually think of such a way. The change in Thaling's tone made Yu Haoran even more confused, so he continued to ask, Thaling, what happened? Yu Haoran, Wu Jingjun is definitely the best successor of the bloodthirsty physique. Thaling continued to praise Wu Jingjun and began to explain what had happened in the blood cocoon. After hearing Thaling's explanation, Yu Haoran secretly rejoiced and could not help but feel happy for Wu Jingjun. Although Wu Jingjun's willpower and perseverance were outstanding, facing the remnant soul of the ancient divine beast, the dragon's remnant soul, not only was he at an absolute disadvantage from the beginning, but he was also continuously attacked by the remnant soul, forcing him to retreat repeatedly. After using several methods and discovering that he could not do anything to the remnant soul of the dragon, Wu Jingjun made up his mind. Since he could not attack, he might as well directly devour. Therefore, he directly used the secret devouring skill. Under the effect of the secret devouring skill, the remnant soul of the dragon could not fight back at all and was directly devoured by Wu Jingjun. After devouring the remnant soul of the dragon, Wu Jingjun not only perfectly received all the power in the sky-devouring snake's blood essence, but also the unique power of the dragon's remnant soul allowed Wu Jingjun's soul to improve unimaginably. The improvement of the soul had unimaginable benefits for Wu Jingjun to break through the Martial Grandmaster, Martial King, and Martial Emperor realms. Yu Haoran, Wu Jingjun is fine now. I think it's time for you to take the Heavenly Elephant's blood essence. After confirming that Wu Jingjun's condition was getting better and there was basically no danger, Thaling suggested. All right. After taking out the Heavenly Elephant's blood essence, Yu Haoran moved slightly away from Wu Jingjun and then sat cross-legged on the ground. First, he adjusted his emotions. When his mind was completely calm, Yu Haoran directly swallowed the Heavenly Elephant's blood essence. Unlike the sky-devouring snake's blood essence that Wu Jingjun had taken, which erupted with unyielding resistance at the beginning, the gentle Heavenly Elephant's blood essence was stimulated little by little, which allowed Yu Haoran to smoothly use the power of the blood essence to improve the grade of his body. However, after a minute, with the continuous eruption of the Heavenly Elephant's blood essence, especially the awakening of the remnant soul of the ancient divine elephant in the blood essence, the originally gentle speed of the blood essence energy instantly erupted by 70%, 80%, 90%, and finally, it erupted completely. Benefiting from Wu Jingjun's experience of fighting against the dragon's remnant soul, Yu Haoran directly used the secret devouring skill the moment the remnant soul of the ancient divine elephant appeared and swallowed the remnant soul of the ancient divine elephant that had just raised its long trunk and was about to roar. As the remnant soul of the ancient divine elephant was swallowed, the direct eruption of the blood essence energy caused the physical body that had already reached the peak of the 9th level to begin to rapidly improve again. With the rapid improvement of the physical body grade, Yu Haoran soon felt a kind of suppression. This kind of suppression was not the suppression of the physical body bottleneck of the Martial Master realm, but the suppression that occurred when his cultivation broke through the 10th level of Martial Disciple realm. Although after the eruption of the Heavenly Elephant's blood essence, the remaining energy was not enough to break through the bottleneck, but Yu Haoran's heart not only did not have a trace of frustration, but also endless excitement. Compared to the improvement of the realm, Yu Haoran was really worried about the physical body. This was because he did not know if the grade of his physical body could enter the complete 10th grade realm like his cultivation. After all, when his cultivation broke through to the 10th level of Martial Disciple realm, he had Thaling's guidance and help. Now, since he had already felt the bottleneck of the 10th level realm, then as long as he had enough energy, he would definitely be able to break through to the 10th level realm. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.